Great beginning to our, continuation of our morning. We've had a great breakfast so far, and now we get a chance to just hear a great presentation. And we are so thankful to have John here at our church and all that he means to us as a church family. And I've heard different times of some personal stories. Maybe I'll hear some of those today, and always encouraged, always amazed of some of the things that God brought John through and how he did that. And we greatly look forward to that. I won't continue much longer. Let's just start with a word of prayer, and then I'll turn it over to Jack Nebelsack, who we are thankful to have here as well, and he'll introduce John. So let's have a word of prayer. Father, we're thankful to be here today. We're thankful for, again, all the freedoms you've blessed us with as a nation. We just sang of the liberty that you've granted us. But we know that, as the saying goes, freedom isn't free, that it took many men and women to serve in our nation's military over our history to preserve the freedoms that we have. And we remember them this weekend. We think of all the lives lost in defense of our freedoms over the years. And we thank you, Father, for, again, working through them to give us the freedoms that we have. We thank you today that we have veterans with us. We thank you today that John is with us and can share of his experiences in Vietnam, and especially how you encouraged him, motivated him, kept him through some of the different things he faced. We think of Jack Nebelsack, who will be speaking here in a moment too, of again, just a man who you've greatly used over the years and used in the service of your country in World War II. And we think of all the veterans that would be here today, and we're thankful for them as well. So let these things be done to your glory. We ask this in Jesus' name, amen. So Jack, would you come forward? While Jack's coming up, during John's presentation, if you have any questions as he's going through his presentation, he likes interaction. I think that would be fair to say. So if you have any questions as he's giving his presentation, raise your hand. This is being filmed. I'll pretend I'm Gary Gutgesell today. I'll bring you the microphone, and before you ask your question, I'll bring you the microphone so we can hear what you have to say, and John can hear it. Just pause while he points you out or acknowledges you, and then I'll bring you the mic for questions, and then I'll bring it to you. You ask your question. John will say what he has to say.
Hopefully
okay.
Answer, yeah.
So first with Jack.
Thank you, Pastor. Thank you, Pastor. I've got written down here, smile. And you know why? Because I get to introduce the speaker of the morning. I get to introduce John Beckenhauer. But John has been a good friend and fellow church member since 1975, almost 50 years, couple shy of 50 years. And trying to narrow the introduction to John down to just a few facts, early life and military career has been interesting, to say the least. He was born 3 years after the end of World War II on November 11th, 1947, which is significant itself because that was the date of armistice of World War I. So it was a significant time for this young man to be born into this life that we know it. He grew up on small farms near Elgin and Albion, Nebraska, and he was born the seventh of 8 sons, and they had 1 sister, which is remarkable in itself. Another story would be how that sister fared among those 8 guys, So, his dad raised cattle on those farms, and milking cows was one of the ways the family made for income. So John was introduced early to chores before school and after school to help the family. So his parents were godly people, reading the Bible as a kids and talking about spiritual matters. John recognized early that biblical truth applied to him as well. He made a commitment to follow Jesus as his personal Savior at age 12. Another pleasant memory for him was being baptized on a moonlight night in Pybel Lake at Pybel Bible Camp near Bassett. Along with his spiritual growth, his love of airplanes and everything connected with aviation also grew. He had worked for a crop duster as flagman in his early teenage years, and he dreamed of becoming a crop duster himself. He got a job at the Neely, Nebraska airport at age 14. Spent all his hard-earned money taking flying lessons there at Neely. He made his first solo flight at 16 and a private license check ride at age 17 as a senior in high school. Upon finishing high school, he enrolled in a junior college at Norfolk. During that first fall semester, one of those famous letters arrived inviting him to Omaha for induction into the armed forces. He wanted to enlist in the Army Air Force training program, so he decided to enlist, but disappointed to find out that he wasn't qualified for the training program because he didn't have a college degree. But there was a wise recruiter that told him about another program that he could still keep flying, and he signed up immediately. And very shortly, he found himself off to helicopter training as part of that program. 6 months basic training at Fort Walters, Texas, and 6 months advanced training at Fort Ruckert, Alabama followed for a year's training there. After this period of training, he was sent to Vietnam in 1968. I thought about that a little bit. You know, you have to shift your thinking, obviously, not to who John is today, but who he was at that time. And he was 19 years old, and that's how old Isaac is, who sits among us this morning, 19. So you have to go back in time thinking about somebody as a young man like that being involved in the war in Vietnam. He served a regular tour of duty in Vietnam was 1 year, but John served 3 tours of duty there in 68, 69, and 70. He flew some of the most advanced aircraft in the military inventory, in the Army inventory, including the Huey gunship, and most of his service was with a 5,000 horsepower heavy lift helicopter called the Chinook. He completed 2,000 missions, including 400 combat assaults. I don't mean to make it sound like I'm reading this, even though I am. I want to be personal in this because John is not just an impersonal guy to me. I've known him for as I've said, just almost 50 years. He's very special to us as a church family, and some of us as individuals as well. So if it sounds like I'm reading it off, here it is. He completed 2,000 missions, including the 400 combat assaults. Most of these flights were over the thickest jungles and most hostile skies in the world at the time. He accumulated 3,800 hours of flight time as a pilot and aircraft commander. Speaking more about Vietnam, over 50% of the 12,000 helicopters used in combat in Vietnam were destroyed by enemy action. Nearly 5,000 airmen were killed and 8,000 were wounded. That's the trouble with all these papers. I appreciate your patience here, because I got one more page to go. I'll find it. Where is it here?
There we go.
That's it. Thank you, Pastor.
You're welcome.
Good he can read numbers. John was shot down. I don't mean to have lost the cadence of this or the importance of it, of what he did there. He was shot down 3 times. He was wounded 3 times. He's a recipient of many numerous awards for bravery and outstanding service. Some of you have been in the military, you know some of these terms. I want to read to you bravery for outstanding service, numerous awards. 56 air medals, 3 bronze stars for valor, the Army Meritorious Service Medal with 3 oak leaf clusters, and the Legion of Merit, and the award of the Legion of Merit. It's easy just to read that all, but it does not carry with it the significance that those awards imply as for those of you that know about the military. He was, there were 14,000 young men that flew helicopters in Vietnam. John is one of 467 who received the Distinguished Flying Cross, which was another award for bravery and special service. I had read before that he was shot down 3 times, wounded 3 occasions. He is here to tell you that he is overwhelmingly grateful to be alive and ultimately blessed to be here with us to share his faith and story. It's a genuine pleasure for me to introduce to you an actual Nebraska-born hero, retired Army Colonel John Beckenhauer, but still active in God's Army, our own John Beckenhauer. John.
Good job, Jack. We are using untested equipment this morning. It's the first time this microphone has been used. Dale back there is at the controls. I'm told that if you want me to sound like General Eisenhower, he's got a switch over here. Want to sound like Colin Powell, you've got another switch over here. So we'll make this work, and before long, Pastor is going to be sounding like Billy Graham on Sunday morning. So that'll be a lot of fun when all this gets started. Well, thank you, Jack, for your introduction. You read it just like I wrote it. Good job. No, I do want to thank Carol and Rick coming in. The front of the church looks fantastic this morning. Some of you got all dressed up really pretty. I see a lot of red, white, and blue out there, so there's a big holiday coming up. And these two in the front row here have been a big influence to me, as you'll see in a few minutes. As Scott pointed out, Jack is a World War II veteran. He served in the South Pacific. Who is that handsome-looking guy up there? Again, he was 19 years old. Pearl Harbor happened when he was a freshman, right, in high school. And right after high school, him and about 3/4 of his class signed up. There was no draft letter came out. That was just something you did. You go to serve your country and doing that. And Jack stepped up and went at it. He went to, I'm not working here. Oh, there we go. Yeah. He served 2 years during the war. Well, I got a few things up there that we would talk about. This thing has gone a timer, so it's, where's Bob? This is going to go on to the next slides before I'm ready to, I think. Maybe I did. We'll see here. Like I said, we're untested here. We'll see what's happening. There's what Jack looks like with his hat on. I asked him one morning, we go to breakfast quite a bit. I asked him one morning, I said, you're in the Navy, what did you do while you're in there? And he said, well, my job on board the Wesson, which is the ship he was on, was to shoot down airplanes, kill Japanese submarines, sweep underwater. Yeah, here we go. Going to lose me. Yeah, stop it. I'll just advance it on my own, yeah. Otherwise, we're going to get done an hour and a half sooner. Which is probably all right for you guys. You want to get home. I'll back up one there. Okay, here we go again. I'll pass this on. There we go. Stop there. I said, okay, what do you do? What was his job? Well, he was in the Navy, and here's a quote down there. Well, he said, I shot down airplanes. We killed Japanese subs. Here we go again. I'll back it up one and see what happens. Sweep underwater mines, which was a big deal because of the number they were out there. And we blow up their things and blow all their things up in the water that got in their way. And then he leans over the table and winks at me and says, and we did a pretty darn good job of it, too. So they did. They won that. These World War II veterans. Whoop. Am I doing that or are you doing that? Yeah. All right. Sorry, folks. Like Jack says, have patience. We'll get through this. We will overcome. I was pretty good at this stuff. Bob and Dale running the technology this morning, and they do every Sunday morning, and they're sight unseen usually, and they get very little recognition. So sometimes when you stop by Dale and that desk back there, make sure you say hello. We always got guys up in the room upstairs too running the cameras and that, and they come before you all do, and they leave after you're done usually too on Sunday morning. So grateful to have them. Sometimes they don't get it right, though, do they? Which is typical military operation here. Tell me when to hit the button. Okay. Well, you got it on 5 seconds or something? Oh. Yeah.
John, it'd be easier to fly a helicopter, I think.
Well, you don't want to make this mistake, that's for sure. Yeah, helicopters are very unforgiving aircraft. I'll get into some of the aviation end of it later on in the briefing. Right now, I want to cover a little bit, or cover some of the information on the different wars that our nation has fought in. Oh, yeah, up to the top. Yeah. There we go. Yes, question somewhere? Oh, was that back here? What's with it? Would have been 65. Got drafted in 66 and went into the service in 67. So I got a delay. I'll get into this story, but once I got my draft notice, how many people got one of those letters in your file somewhere? Anybody? A couple, three of you do? Y'all know what that is, right? You don't have a choice. You get that draft letter, you're going, unless you can't pass physical. And about half of the country's seniors or sophomores that year in college got that letter. So the Vietnam War was at its height at the time, and we good? Yeah, he was at it. The Vietnam War was at the height of the time, and we had a little over 500,000 people in Vietnam, and a rate of 240 people a day were getting killed, sent home in body bags. So that was nothing compared to the war that Jack was in. All right, here we go. This is you see Jack wears a hat all the time. He had it on here this morning. It says the the USS Weston on it. It was a battleship destroyer escort, and looked a lot like this one. Actually, it looks exactly like that one because that's the picture itself. And the Weston earned 7 battle stars, which means it was involved in 7 of those conflicts on the South Pacific, whereas Okinawa, Guadalcanal, any of those that were on there. So Jax loves to be a humble man, but this is one of the important days he had. Probably the most intense day he probably had in the Navy. Japanese Zero one morning attack. A bunch of them came out of the sky, low level across the water, and Jack's job at that time was to be up here on the deck of this ship, and right there is where his point of duty was. Japanese Zero came in right about 30 feet behind him right here, crashed into the ship and killed 9 people, wounded a bunch more. The plane, the pilot was ejected from the aircraft onto the deck of the aircraft, or the ship, and went into the sea. So that was one of his exciting days. And I'm sure, as you see wearing the hat here, I met Jack. First time I met Jack was at that front door right back there in that church. We were having church over in that side of the building at that time. I walked up the door with Ann, and we had 2 little kids with us. And I reached out. I said, look, he was wearing a sport coat at the time. You remember this? He had a little flag on it. And as somebody who had just returned from a war just 2 or 3 years earlier, myself, brotherhood recognizes each other. And so I recognized that. He stuck his hand out and shook my hand. And if you've ever shaken hands with Jack, you know it's got a different feel. And I thought, yeah, he's probably a World War II veteran, looking at his age at him. And he probably lost those 2 fingers in battle somewhere, right? Big, good war story, but didn't turn out that way. He stuck them through a table saw and lost them both. So wasn't the hero that I thought he was, after all. But I love the guy. He's been a great friend. As Jack said, we've had a good relationship. That says we got a lot to thank for the World War II veterans. If it hadn't been for these guys stepping up, unlike any other war that the United States has been involved in, the impact that they had is something that you and I would feel every day. If Japanese would have won that war, or Germans would have won that war, we would be speaking a different language, most likely in our schools right now. You know, and think about that impact from there on down, what difference those veterans made by stepping up and going into that. The World War II was the worst of any of the wars in mankind up until that time. The battle deaths, you can see the numbers here, is 15 million military died, another 225 million wounded, and of course the civilian deaths. With all the bombing and stuff that was going on, civilian deaths were horrendous all around the world from those bombers that were being built at the time. Every Memorial Day, we put on our pretty shirts and we go down to Waiuka Cemetery, and we have a great time. Go out breakfast afterwards. And what do you think? Good-looking soldiers there, huh? Yeah. So thank you, Jack, for your service, for stepping up, serving when you do. The World War II veterans, like I said, have earned our honor and our respect. And if you get a chance sometime this weekend, give that man a big hug, and anybody else you see as a veteran, and that includes me, I'll take one. Yeah, and that's why we all wear those Vietnam veteran hats and our veterans hats, because we like to be recognized, but we love the hugs that I get from that. That's pretty prominent throughout the West. Yeah. So not to be outdone by you, Jack, I returned your favor and appreciate your being here this morning. Well, one of the things that's totally inappropriate to say, we got Happy Thanksgiving, Happy Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Easter, but you do not want to say Happy Memorial Day for obvious reasons. Going to spring a leak in my eye here. Everyone, watch out. It's not just any holiday. It's the responsibility that we all have, especially the veterans, to recognize and to show respect for the sacrifice that these soldiers and sailors and airmen have gone before us have done. And I want to the only reason I'm here this morning is to push that out onto you and the general public, as these people gave it all. And to recognize that, President Reagan probably said it better than anybody else. Memorial Day is a day of honor. Today we honor the sacrifices of our fallen who put their lives on the line for our nation, for us, and for future generations of fellow Americans. These men and women answered the call to serve and defend our country with courage, dedication, selflessness, knowing full well that the risks were great, but the cause was even greater. It's been a privilege for me to stand with those men, to stand with Jack. I've personally served with men who were killed in my unit. As Jack was saying, down there in the Vietnam Wall in Washington, D.C., there were 6,000 names of pilots on that wall, and another 4,000 crewmen that crashed in those airfields. There's something like 32 of these military cemeteries, I have a hard time getting that word out, around the world where military deaths or dead people are buried. Washington, D.C. with Arlington National Cemetery is probably the one that's the most recognized around the world. The price of freedom is very great, and it's our duty not to forget them. You see this sign around every now and then, and it kind of hits you hard when you think about it. The only two defining forces have offered to die for you: Jesus Christ and the American soldier. One died for our sins, for our soul, the other for our freedom. Active duty right now, and we got a couple of them in our back room right back here. Where's Isaac? Right back here. He's the newest veteran I think we got in the store, if you haven't met him yet. National Guard, right, or Air Guard? Which is it? National Guard. Okay. Thank you for your service and being here. But one point only, not everybody is called to go into the military. Not everybody is cut out to do it. And if you decide to go into the military and it's something that you're going to have as a calling, it's not just something that comes naturally. You love your country, you want to serve your country, do the right thing by your country, and serve. Only 1.2% of the United States population today is in the military. 1.8 million people. Of the inactive guys that have served already and gotten out, there's about 16 million. There we go. Now, there's war memorials that will be attended in around the world right now, in the world tomorrow, but mostly, or Monday, I guess it is. There's war memorials all over the place. We got to really find one right here in Lincoln, Nebraska, on 27th and Antelope Road. If you have never been down there and walked through those memorials down there, they're fabulous. But I don't think anybody does it finer than what the city of Washington, D.C. does. This picture was taken at the top of the Washington Monument. You're looking west. If you look, knew I'd do that. Yeah, it's not working. Is it working? I don't see it. What's that? In the flower. Oh, there we go. Hey. I fly helicopters, you know. I don't do this every day. Anyway, here you can see the Washington Monument, and I'm about right up there. And that thing, they got little tiny windows, and you can reach your camera up there and take a picture. But right here is the World War II Memorial, the biggest one of them all. And it's very, loud. It's just like World War II, it's big and loud. Jack and Bonnie came out when we lived out there, and when they dedicated that memorial. It was a great time and a great monument to honor their service. And there's 4 of them right here in a row. World War I, which is just a tiny little one, and they weren't making a lot of memorials then. That really never even started until the Vietnam War memorial went up. And that one's down here in this corner, and these trees right in here. The Korean War memorial, you can just barely see it right in there. You can see the soldiers on it. And of course, you go across that bridge and turn left, you're going to go right into the Pentagon. And right behind the Pentagon is the Arlington National Cemetery. If you've never been there, go. It is amazing to them, especially stop over and watch the Tomb of the Unknown Soldiers changing of the guard. Very impressive, very respectful and honorable to the military folks. Another button, right? Ta-da. Okay. World War I. I'm going to go through each of these. The number you see on there is how many died during that war. I didn't put the wounded up because I was running out of time trying to find and doing the research of it. Kansas City has probably the best World War I museum in the country. If you haven't been down there, it's on the south side where the old airport was. And take a couple hours and stop in there sometime and see that and honor those. World War II. There we go. Of course, I just pointed that out. In Washington, D.C., there's 4 different parts to it. On this wall, right here, which is the back side of the memorial, you see all these little stars. Each one of those stars stood for 10,000 dead. Gold stars, as you know, gold stars are the Gold Star families, are those that lost a son or daughter in a wartime situation. So that's what that whole wall back there represents. Each one of these towers that you see here, up there, there's 50 of them, and each one of them has a state name on the front and honors those from each of the states. And at nighttime is a beautiful time. Go see them during the day, but then go back and see them at night. Pretty impressive. Korean War Memorial there, 54,246. Just about as many as we did in Vietnam. Vietnam War lasted 14 years. Korean War was just a little under 5. They lost about the same number of casualties as the Vietnam War. We were about 4,000 more, but we fought ours over 14 different years. So the Korean War was pretty intense. To me, it's my favorite memorial for veterans out there. Is the great story behind it. Then the Vietnam Memorial. Of course, the story behind this, there's 72 panels going that way. At the top of the first panel in the middle of the V is the first person that was died. That was 1959. He was killed. He was a military advisor sent over there by President Eisenhower. And then each person that died chronologically by the day they were killed are the names that come down that wall. And then you go to the next panel, next panel, next panel. 72 panels go that way, and then they start again at the other end of the V with the Addison going down. I have, starting on panel 40 West is when I got over there in 68. The first casualties that we lost in our unit are on line number 8 there. And we've got over 124, I think, total that were in our unit between there and panel 71. Panel 72 has Clyde Love's name at the very top. He was killed 2 years after he came back and then went back over again for a second tour. Clyde Love's name is at the top of that panel. So that's my personal experience with the thing. Of course, this painting is pretty famous, called Reflections. Yeah, speaks for itself, I guess. Every time I went down there and looked into that wall, it all comes back. And this is, 50-some years later. I can't talk about it. The Gulf War, 258 people, best war we ever fought in, with as far as number of casualties was in, and we did that all in less than 9 months and came up with it. I was in Germany at the time and had a little bit to do with that war as well. And then, of course, the War on Terror, which started on 9/11, 2000, and went just past 20 years, and that war is over. Of course, this Bible verse is used anytime you'll hear it a lot on Memorial Day weekend, especially. But these guys, the word friends here, these guys died for not even knowing us, a lot of them. They died for their fellow buddies beside them, left and right, they say. But it's amazing how this country is, all through its history, people have stepped forward and lay down their life for you just for freedom. Don't forget it, and don't ever take it for advantage, or let it take advantage of you. So, killed in action, each one of them. I broke that down in that. And the total number of killed in action, KIAs, throughout the history of our country, going back to the Revolutionary War up until this day. I thought this number would be a lot higher, and it is in some respects, because there were civilians involved in it. Just a little over 1.2 million, or almost 1.3 million, in service of it. Those still alive today. World War I veterans, of course, they're all gone now. World War II, we're fast approaching that. About 600 of them a day are passing. Of course, they're all 90 years and older at this time. Korean War, they're all basically 85 and older. And then Vietnam, they're my age, 70 and older. Jack mentioned I was 19 when I went over. There were kids over there, 18 and 17. The youngest Vietnam veteran to die in Vietnam was 16 years old. He lied to his recruiter. They signed him up anyway, and off he went. He was killed the first week he was over there. So. Okay, 4 things that I love, and I've learned throughout my life to appreciate all of these. Some more than others, and some more sometimes than others. But it was my love for God, my family, my country, and freedom. Not necessarily in that order every time, but those are my favorite loves. My favorite things that I'm most proud of, I'm a dad. I got 2 children, a boy and a girl. Son is in the Air Force. He's a pilot in the Air Force. I got a daughter that's married to a merchant marine. She's a stay-at-home mother right now. And the most fun I've had lately is being a grandpa. I've got 18 grandchildren with that. How many is it? 8 of biological. Each one of them has 4 of their own. They've both adopted kids, and they got a whole string of foster kids that come running into the room making lots of noise too when they come around. So it's a lot of fun. I love being a grandpa, and I'm very proud to be a Vietnam veteran. And I should say there's only 3 listed there. There's actually 4 that I really love too, and that's my gorgeous wife who's sitting in the back here. She's wearing the same shirt I am, so we're twins this morning. But we were married in Australia back in 1971, so we're coming up on 52 years, if I did the math right. Yep. Married to my first wife that whole time. Man. sure what I'm doing wrong here, but I'm pretty good at pushing buttons in helicopters, but something that's happening here. Is this battery maybe low, maybe? I don't know. Anyway, there we go. All right, so we're going to take you on a little journey now, my journey of faith and how much has affected my career and how it still does in my life yet today. Losing my momentum here. There we go. So before I get too far into it, I'm going to shoot some disclaimers at you. I'm going to throw a lot of pictures. I think I got about 160 pictures that you'll be looking at. I sorted them out of the some 6,000 that I have from Vietnam and other places. So not all of them are mine. Some of them I had to lift off of the internet, and some people gave me, and et cetera, et cetera. But they're all real. There's none of them fake. I haven't photoshopped or altered any of them. And you're going to see they're not all the best quality, but I've enhanced, either darkened them or tried to make them lighter. Slides taken in the 1970s and the 60s. If any of you took slide pictures in those days, if you haven't climate controlled them, they're fading or getting milky. I found that with all my slides. So I've got them all digitized now to save it that. But that's where we are. So some of them are going to be graphic. I've got some little kids in here, but I don't think they should be offended by it. The photos, got a different one. All right, B model. See what we got here. This is the one you use, Scott? Right finger's all worn out on this one. Yeah. Anyway, there's going to see some photos up here that kind of reveal the culture, lifestyle of the military, and don't be offended by that. There's no cuss words. I took all those out, but you're going to see people smoking cigarettes and drinking beer and other things. That's the lifestyle of the military. And I think that some of the other stuff that I've cleaned up here, too, I'm going to spell out most of the military is great with acronyms. You know, they got everything, an acronym for everything. I think I've cleared them up on the slides that I'm using, but I might inadvertently use one, and if I do and you don't know what it is, raise your hand and we'll clear that up. Say again? Vietnam War was controversial, and I'm not going to get into the politics of it. I might interject a word here or two there, but don't ask me any questions about how I feel about the war. We're not going to get into that this morning. We'll do that next week. So you come back and we'll discuss that. I came home 52 years ago, so my memory's a little bit faded. So some of the events and the facts and figures I'm doing on that. And I can always tell everybody, if I don't know the facts, I'll just make some up, and we'll use those. But Mark Twain had a good quote there, and I think that pretty well fits me. The older I get, the more clearly I remember things that never even happened. You know, so that's where I'm going to go with my talk today. Nothing I say is any longer classified. And as I tell everybody, if I told you classified information, I'd have to shoot you anyway. So then we're not going to do that. So we're going to go in here, and I'll start with from the very beginning, and I'll briefly go through some of my family history and how that was a deep root for me to go forth in my career and throughout my life in doing that. My family came over from Germany, 1867. That left picture there is a fourth generation picture. My dad's on the far right. My oldest brother is in his arms, and then my grandmother and my grandfather was taking the picture, evidently, and my great-grandma and grandpa Palmer's on the far left there, all farmers. They homesteaded a farm up in Nebraska and Canada. My granddad, Amos and Jesse, that's their wedding picture there, and then my mom and dad's wedding picture there. It's taken in 1937, June 22nd. All of them celebrated their 60th anniversary, wedding anniversary. So that's pretty good. I didn't realize that myself until I got their history out yesterday and said, well, when they died and when they were married. And I said, well, wow, look at that. You know, so I'm working on it, Ann. We're going to get to 62 and pass them all up here. There's our homestead farm up in Wayne, Nebraska. Was there when where most of the kids were born. My dad used to brag about him being born in the corner of that house. And then our oldest son was born in the corner of that house. And so that started the chain. That's me would circle around there. And as Jack pointed out, 8 boys in a row. Mama had her tooth tied. Was 48 years old and had a baby. And the baby came along was a girl. So a miracle. Yeah. Kind of neat. Neat story as it goes along. Those brothers are all alive, or except for one yet. Lost the 4th one about 4 years ago now from lung cancer. And this family has grown from my mom and dad down. We got 261, and there's 3 more on the way right now. So that's just from 2 people, counting the brides and that. This was taken 3 years ago out in Colorado. We get together once every 5 years, so it's quite a clan and a lot of fun when we do get together. 2 key things happened to me that changed affected my life a great deal from the time I was 10 years old and older. Jack mentioned one of them, but the second one here, I was out riding a tractor one morning when I was old enough to push the clutch forward and be able to stop it. Dad put us all boys on tractors, and we were out either like driving the tractor to work or to the fields and back, or when they got older and were old enough to manipulate the tractor and the discs and the hose and plows and stuff on it. Us kids were on the farm working. From the very beginning, he drove us out there and drove us pretty hard in the work ethic. I was sitting on the tractor, and we're going across a really hot day. I remember sweating. I loved to drive in the tractor. But I looked up in this airplane, comes right down, crop duster, and he's going back and forth. I'm driving, and he's going back and forth. Man, that's going to be a lot more fun doing that than sitting on this tractor. Put myself in that cockpit, and I've been doing it ever since. That was one of these, if you all know the poem High Flight, where it used to be on TV every night at the close of the day or something now, where the nice little poem is, just read the first couple lines here. Oh, I have slipped the surly bonds of earth and danced the skies with laughter silvered wings, and while with silent lifting mind I've trod the high unpassed trespass sanctity of space, put out my hand and touch the face of God. Flying, and you're up in the clouds. That the guy's got it right, nailed it. If you got that itch, you jump in an airplane and doing it. You know how I feel when I go out in there. And I get to it here in a minute. But when I started flying, I love to get up high and play around in the clouds when you do it, and not realizing that was against the law to do that. But my first instructor, he said there's a big difference between being a pilot and an aviator. He said one is a technician. You knew how to fly the airplane, and that's one thing. But the other is an artist. And love a flight. You can make that airplane do everything you want to, and you're up there dancing with the clouds and touching the face of God. You can't believe what kind of feeling that is and the excitement that it gives for us that go on to be lucky enough to be pilots and doing that. Dad was a farmer. We had animals. Dad never had any qualms about getting us out there and working on them. Riding them or milking them or whatever the chance be, slopping the hogs was something we started from very beginning. He needed it, I guess. We were dirt poor, as you can probably imagine. We had never missed a meal, though. I don't ever remember being hungry. Dad took a lot of responsibility on with that many kids, and to raise that kind of family without missing a meal would have been quite an achievement, which I didn't even realize until I started having kids. Some of you seen this picture before, and Steve's, where are you at, Steve? He has the same experience than I had. He's 8, 9, 10 kids he's got in your family. How many do you have? 10 kids in your family, Steve? Yeah. He had the same experience. You all we sat every day. Dad made sure that at least one dad made sure we all sat around the table at least one time, all at once. And the values that can be instilled in your family when you do that. Less than 50% of the families, according to Focus on the Family, do this, that even sit down and have one meal together with doing that. So pass those values on. If you're going to teach your kids Christian values, you can put this into your head and make an effort to make that happen for you. You know, all these things that you learn, you know, telling the truth, being honest, don't lie, cheat, or steal, work hard, and work with competence. Look after and love one another. Be kind and selfish. Give generously of your time and talents. All those values that are taught in the Bible as doing it. Dad made sure, didn't fail. We are going to church on Sunday mornings. Get your chores done. Get in there, get your clothes changed. We're going to church. Rain or shine, snow, sometimes this high. Trying to get to church on Sunday mornings was a max priority. This was in Albion, Nebraska. This church still exists. I see on the right, it's pretty run down. I don't think they have services there anymore. But that was a value that we had. And was Dad always poked fun. There'd be some neighbors that lived 2 blocks away that couldn't get to church because the snow was too deep. And we'd be sitting there stoking the fire at the church to make sure the church was warm when we got there on Sunday mornings. Teaching of the Bible, mandatory in our church. We learned right from the beginning the Bible stories and the right and wrong, the 10 Commandments, all that good stuff. So I had a good foundation I had growing up, and could never be more thankful than what I am for that. And that my mother was probably the softest heart woman I've ever known. She was great mother. She was a Bible teacher. She had a lot of passion for the Lord. And we would sit, my aunt gave us a storybook of Bible stories, and Mom would sit down on an old rocking chair, and we'd sit around there, around the fire. And that was one of my favorite memories growing up. And always praying. We just prayed going in there. Now, y'all wonder why I'm so good looking. So smart and intelligent, because I went to a one-room schoolhouse. You know, how many here have experienced that? You know, just a lot of folks growing up in Nebraska. If you're under 50 years old, probably had that experience. Learning the 3 R's. We went town school and country school through my years, and growing up, so I always like to throw this picture in when I'm talking to kids under 20 years old these days. They've never seen a one-room schoolhouse unless they've been to a museum somewhere where there is one. But I always remember there was a flag. We had a map. There was only 48 states in those days on that map right there. And I guess until I was about 5th grade, I thought we only had 2 presidents. Abraham Lincoln and George Washington. That's the only 2 we ever studied. So that was probably that. And you see, we had the old blackboard up front. And cursive. How many of you did the old cursive thing? You know, that kind of thing. And if you was really good in class and kept quiet, you got to go out to the wood pile and get to bring the wood in and put it in the fireplace. That was kind of fun. Okay, second decision that I look back on very fondly was, I said, we were raised from day one with Christian values, had Christian parents. They set the example. We were told all the stories, and I don't ever remember anybody ever cornering me, though, and says, you need to make a decision here. The greatest decision you'll ever make in your life depends on what you do for accepting Christ and trusting Him as your Savior. I was 12 years old, had Dad sent us off first time I'd left the farm to go anywhere except to Grandpa's house. He made sure we went to church camp, and there was a church camp up in Pybel Lake, Nebraska. And where's Adam? If you haven't gone fishing in this lake yet, you might want to do that. Great place, a little serene place up in between Spalding and Bassett, up in there, and you can do it. So there you go. You see pictures of it. Pybel Bible Camp was run by some church organization, and everybody could pay $6 and you could go to the camp for a whole week and up there. Accepted Christ, and my brother was the pastor at the service that night at the chapel, and he talked to me earlier and he says, where are you at with this? I said, well, I know it all. He said, no, you don't. So you got to make this decision sometime in your life. And I said, yeah, I believe all that. And he said, well, have you considered baptism? Because we're going to have a call tonight forward. I said, well, I'll be there. So we went down to that lake, and it was a moonlit night. It was just a neat time experience and drilling that. So that's the two decisions I make. From now on, we're going to speed up a little bit here. I got we got to my 14th birthday. Life wasn't going so good out here in Nebraska farms. There was a lot of drought going on. My father was deep into debt. He couldn't make the payments for seed corn or for feeding livestock or any of that. Drought, and the banks came out and foreclosed on us, and we lost everything. And Dad had a terrible failure that he felt in doing that. But he never gave up his faith. I mean, we still go to church on Sunday. We would make sure that we prayed at every meal, and we thanked God for what we did have. So we moved into one of the guys that was from the church we went to in Albion had moved up to Neely. He run the lumber yard up there. Her dad was in trouble and said, why don't you come up and I'll put you to work in my lumber yard driving a cement truck. Dad knew how to do that. So we all moved up there with hardly more than just the furniture we had in the house and the clothes we had on our back. That was when I was in 8th grade, and we stayed there until I was a senior. Graduated from Neely High School. This guy right over here graduated. I don't know, did you graduate from there or just went there for a while? Yeah. So still have connections here, and what to do it. Now, Neely at the time, and this came from my love of country, and I guess and knowing I had a responsibility to do my part for that, is my high school teachers, almost half of them were World War II veterans. A lot of farmers around, World War II veterans. Every year we'd have a 4th of July parade down Main Street. My barber was a Vietnam veteran, or a World War II veteran. So I had a lot of conversations, and Dad never told me you don't talk to them veterans about the war. They don't want to talk. You don't make them talk. Well, I would say, what'd you do? What'd you do in the war, Dad? And they'd share. A lot of them would just come right out and tell you how horrible it was and what kind of experience it was in that. But moving into town, hard times led to my dream coming true. I never gave up this thing. I want to fly. Every time an airplane go over, I'd say, that's a Cessna 172, and he's going about 80 miles an hour. And he knows where he's going, and I don't. So we got into town, and Dad kicked us out and got to go to work. So all of us went out, and I was, 12 years old. So I go off to, or 14, I guess. So I go off to, got a paper route, and I went, started delivering papers, and I think I made about a nickel a dime a paper I sold, and then had a nice long paper route, and I made enough money to buy a bicycle, and got on the bicycle, and I'd ride out to the airport 3 miles south of Neely, and just hang around those pilots out there. I loved airplanes. They just let me go out there and wash them planes for you and do anything. Just let me play with them, get in them. And so pretty soon, Wally Cook, the guy that was the instructor at the time out there, he said, well, jump in the back seat. You can go with me. We went down Norfolk. I had to get some parts. So, that was my first airplane ride. It was way better than I even thought it was going to be. Touched the face of God out there. So he saw how enthusiastic I was about it. So every time he was going somewhere and he had an empty seat or any other pilot at the airport, I'd jump in the back and away we'd go. And pretty soon, he was putting me in the front seat. He'd let me push the stick and push on the pedals, and I could do that stuff. And pretty soon I could land and take off in a little Super Cub 18. And so when I was 14 going on 15, he says, well, you can't I'm not going to let you fly this thing by yourself, but if you go off to flight school in Norfolk and take 6 hours of instruction and get certified by a legal instructor, he says you can get yourself a pilot's license and you can solo when you're 16 years old. I'm in. So every dime I had went to flying airplanes. It was like $7, $8 an hour to fly this thing in those days. I think it's like, what, 150 now to fly them. But every dime I had went to flying lessons. I got my certification, got that, went on the 16th. Sometime during my 16th year, I went out and flew around the airport there in Neely 3 times, made 3 touch and goes, and off I went. Dream, I'm going to become a crop duster pilot. And I love that. Yes?
Is that you flying underneath those power lines?
Yeah, right. No, it's not me. I never got a chance to do crop dusting. I sure as heck would have, though. You know, that, yeah, you either fly under them or you over them, and you don't go through them. That doesn't work so good. And a lot of guys would catch their tail. If they weren't really good at it, they would catch their tail and break the pole line. And usually you could keep flying, but occasionally my brother did it anyway. He flipped him over, and he crashed the aircraft and destroyed it, but he got out okay. So he sat down, Wally Cook sat down with me and said, hey, if you want to be a pilot, he says, you're going to be a real pilot, you're going to want to do more than just do crop dusting. We don't make a lot of money doing this. You want to make the big money. He says, you go get your commercial license, go off to college, get a college degree, go in the Air Force or the Army or whatever, get some flying with the Navy, fly jets, and then do that for 6-8 years, and then go over and talk to the airlines over there. And sure enough, before you know it, you'll be making millions of dollars flying the big bombers or the big airliners and doing that. So that's what I set my goal to do. And a little Bible verse comes to mind here, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. God speaking to Jeremiah said, you're not going to do what you think you want to do. This is what I want you to do. And so about that time is when I got my letter from Uncle Sam. As Jack says, one of your favorite things to do was to get that letter. But anyways, Lord was speaking to me. He said, okay, John, you want to be a pilot, but you're going to be not only serving in the Lord's Army, you're going to be serving in the United States Army. So I had the privilege in to bring both of those together, and had an amazing journey from that point on. Got that letter. I was supposed to report down to Omaha to the draft center. I go down. I pass all the physical, which wasn't much more than, can you do this? Pull the trigger, and yeah, you can do that. You're good. You're going in the Army. But you had a choice of going to Army, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, and I didn't know what any of the rest. I didn't know what any of them were, really. I didn't have much of experience other than what I'd found out talking to the World War II guys in Neely. But they said, go talk to your recruiter over there and try to decide what you want to do. So riding the bus back to Neely, the Army recruiter says, well, you come and see me. You got any skills? And I said, well, yeah, I can hunt pretty good, shoot a rifle pretty good. He said, well, there you go. You want to go in the Army. You don't want to go in the Marine Corps. Whatever you do, don't go to the Marine Corps. That's not a joke. But anyway, they got back to Neely. I went in and seen the drill sergeant at running the recruiting station there, and asked him what my skills were, and I said, well, I hunt and I fly. He said, well, here you go, and he throws me this magazine, Popular Mechanics. Y'all probably read that one or time or two growing up, but Army had this flight program where if you didn't have a college degree, you could go fly helicopters if you could pass the requirements for getting in it. Yeah, that's what I want to do. So I had a chance to do that by taking the flight physical, and now I'm out of gas again here. Here we go. So very quickly, I got through that whole process, got signed up, qualified for flight school, and so away I went. I went out to Norfolk Air Force, got on North Central Airlines. You all been on there. Flew down to Omaha, stayed in Omaha, Logan Fontenelle hotel, jumped on the Union Pacific next morning, drove it down, or rode it down to Kansas City, got on another airplane, went to Fort Polk, Louisiana. Down there for 16 weeks of training, and then off to flight school right after that. Here we go. There we go. I got to hold the button down. Now I've got it figured out. Okay, and flight school then was pretty tough training. At the time, I was one of the younger pilots in there, but I was probably one of the most experienced. Most people that had gotten drafted and decided to go this route from New York City, Chicago, had never been in an airplane before. First ride was going down to there. Now they're going to be the pilots of a helicopter. So there was a lot of learning to do when you're doing. Warrant officer rota ring, was 9 months long. You go through as a cadet E5. Pay grade was $220 a month. You got another $64 on top of that for flight pay, and you got a $100,000 life insurance, and that was for free. It's all free, you know. So then you go over. They got the neatest part, I thought, man. You got a free flight suit. You got free room and board. Got a helmet and some of those fancy sunglasses that Tom Cruise wears in Top Gun. And then boots, maps, Jepson charts, all that stuff. When I was learning to fly, cost money. Each class that we started, like I said, the Vietnam War was huge at the time. They were trying to graduate as many pilots as they could. They actually had more helicopters in the country than what they had airplanes or pilots to fly them. So there was a huge emphasis to get everybody through class. But they didn't deteriorate the quality of the training at all. More than 50%. The people that started didn't finish. So they either got killed during training, and about, I don't know, it was like 4% of the pilots that were in training got killed they crashed during flight school. A huge wipeout of people for, you know, everything from drinking alcohol and carrying on to just didn't want to fly anymore. So by the time we got to graduation time 9 months later, we were down to 200 class, but the Army was graduating 2 classes every month, so it was about $400 pilots a month they're sending over to Vietnam. When you graduated, you were a warrant officer, which is the halfway between a sergeant major and a second lieutenant, but it's the same pay grade as a second lieutenant. Same goes, I think, in the Navy, right, with the warrant officer corps and doing that. Flight school was a lot of fun. Gosh, I got to fly for nothing. I even got paid to do it, so I died and gone to heaven. First helicopter you fly is that OH-13. That's like putting you in a Jeep and trying to drive a Jeep. And you get 80 hours in that, and you transition over into the first turbine jet-powered aircraft, the UH-1B. It was like transferring into a Chevy sedan, you know, as a 4-door. And it was a lot more horsepower than the 2-seater Bell Ranger. And you got 80 hours in that, and then you advanced into what's called tactical training, learn how to hover with the sling load. You'd have to do tactics, low-level conversing, and flying formation. That was about 40 hours of that training, and then they selected you for either rotary wing air ambulance, or you flew air ambulance, slicks, which were the passenger and cargo carrying Hueys, gunships, which were what you see in the picture there, or cargo, which is what I learned later to do in the end of my training in that there. So, and that was like getting put into a Corvette. That airplane was amazing what it would do. And then when I got into the final phase, the Cobra's gunship, that had just come out. Brand new aircraft, only 3 feet wide. The blade is 42 inches wide. Fly 200 knots. Thing was like flying a Ferrari. I mean, whoa, that thing would really move compared to everything else you flew in and doing it. 2 weeks before graduation, I had my first incident. Rule number 1, helicopter pilots, if something bad hasn't happened, it's about to. I was, like I said, I was in gunship training at the time. We'd refueled And I'm sitting in the left seat, the pilot's sitting in the right seat. We took off, and we're going to go out to the gun range and shoot up a bunch of rockets and machine guns. We just taken off, so I'm just lifting up. We got about 300 feet in the air, and engine quit. Airspeed, altitude are your two favorite friends. I didn't have either one. I wasn't flying at the time. I had a map in my lap. The pilot didn't realize what was going on. There was a little sound difference, but the engine rotors are still turning, but they're not going to do it very long if you don't bottom pitch. And it's called auto rotation. Slammed that thing to the floor, and we went down. And there was only about 5 seconds to line up on a cornfield that we had below us. Went into that cornfield and turned sideways. Now, there's a little thing I saw over at Hobby Lobby the other day, and I thought, well, maybe that fits right here, because I had one of those moments. Life is not measured by the number of breaths we take, but by the moments that take our breath away. I just lost my breath that morning. In that 3 seconds, I didn't have much time to do it. And I look back that incident and many more that I've said, and I'm like seriously impressed, and I'm still alive today. And the stroke I had last fall, it's still holding true. And have you ever looked back, at your past and realized it was God that kept you alive? There's so many times, you were a second late or a second ahead of speed, or you turned left instead of right, and you think back afterwards, wow, that was God's leading in doing that. I had many of those moments that took my breath away, and that was one of them. This is what I ended up looking like. That's not the helicopter that we crashed that morning, but it was the same angle that we ended up at when we rolled up on the terrace. We went right over with it, and the rotor blade cut through the cockpit and hit the armor seat that was on the inside. I reached up, pulled the emergency handle, and jumped out of the aircraft, and the fuel was all over us and everything. So the biggest fear we have when you crash in a helicopter is, one, if you get all banged up, normally that rotor blade comes through the fuel pit, the cockpit. The second blade comes through the fuel tank, and normally gas flies all over, and if you're in the cockpit, you're a sitting torch. And so we were blessed that morning. It didn't because the engine had already quit, so it wasn't turning when we hit the ground, which was what saved our lives at the time. And you can see a Huey will burn to the ground in about 8 minutes, just nothing left. So you got to get out, and you got to make decisions pretty quick. So I had to get looked at for whether it was pilot error or mechanical error. Of course, if it was pilot error, I would have probably been eliminated from flight school. But they determined that afternoon the engine was dead. So I was cleared to fly the next day, and I graduated 2 weeks later and was also selected then to fly this next aircraft, which is the CH-47, and mighty fine aircraft. As my instructor said the first day, if God was meant for men to fly, it would be to do so in a Chinook helicopter. I believed that after I got to understand that aircraft and what its capabilities were. The Army, United States technology was superb at that time. It's the actual workhorse. I mean, it's got 2 engines. That sucker is capable of just about anything that you request for an aircraft or a helicopter to do. They're about $75 million a piece. You got 275 or 2,500 horsepower engines. You can see the size of it there. 2.5 gallons, 2.5 hours of fuel. When you fly, you take off full of tank. You can go for 2.5 hours and you're out of gas. So you had to watch that. We could lift up 9,000 pounds, 6,000 pounds of fuel. So if you're draining down the fuel, you could get up to 15,000 pounds of cargo, internal and external. You could carry inside and outside the aircraft. You could stick 60 soldiers in there if they were Vietnamese. Put Americans in there, you get about 33. So the American soldier usually carried about 80 pounds of gear on board. Of course, they're a little bigger, a little wider, and they carry a lot more gear. The Vietnamese, they just kept coming, man. Where in the world? Where they got room to sit down in there? But that was what it could do. And a helicopter company there's about 36 pilots. This is a full TO&E, table of distribution and equipment. 36 pilots. There was 16 aircraft in a Chinook company, about 180 mechanics and support specialists, refuelers, sheet metal people, hydraulics people, all that. So when you go to move down the road, you got all that with you in a Chinook company. And got a little jingle going on back there. Okay, and then it takes, in peacetime, non-combat, you're flying with 3 people on board minimum. You need a flight engineer who runs the back, everything in the back of the aircraft in the cargo area. You got an aircraft commander who is the Army gives you the responsibility to take care of that aircraft and the safety of the crew. Peter pilot, the guy sits on the right, is usually a lot less experienced than the aircraft commander is. He's the trainer all the time. So you're trying to get this new guy up to speed on all the things that the aircraft can do and do it. Difference between the aircraft commander and Peter pilots. Aircraft commander, you would equivalent to a tenured professor at a university versus a freshman in high school, probably, and some of the experience level in doing that. Massive amounts of experience, and the difference between the two of them usually. I would get in with these guys, and this guy, I mean, he'd talk about stuff during World War II when he was flying bombers, and then he'd go to Korea and he was flying P-51s, and I'm sitting there going, I got to fly this thing and try to impress him on doing that. When you go into a combat situation, you take 2 more with you, door gunners. 1 on each side. I'll show you the picture in a second of those. It was 10 hours of flight time. For every 10 hours the aircraft flew, it took 100 hours of maintenance. So if you took 10 guys, work on the aircraft overnight, working 10 hours, they should be able to get that aircraft, all the details, maintenance done on it overnight in order to fly it the next day. The guys that ran the maintenance over there were the lifeline. I mean, we didn't have good mechanics, we didn't fly. And if we didn't have dedicated mechanics, parts would fly off of the aircraft. You know, I mean, they're double check, everything in doing that. Our maintenance guys, if you didn't have good maintenance, you didn't have good flying. And you couldn't get 6 or 8 aircraft off the ground every day. You might just get 1 or 2. So the mission critical of the maintenance guys were unbelievable. The experience they had to keep the aircraft flying that they did. The door gunners didn't have any mechanical training. Most of them that we had in Vietnam were former infantrymen a year or 2 earlier in earlier tours in Vietnam. They knew the gun. They knew how to shoot it and make it reliable. And they weren't afraid to. Different guns that we had aboard our aircraft and the Hueys. The most prominent one was, of course, the M16. Could fire 1,200 rounds a minute. Keep everybody's heads down. You can see here the different positions. These guys got after it when they got out there because our lives depended on it. The gun on the far right there, I don't want to talk too much about guns and ammunition and all that, but these guys were amazing, and this was a minigun. The one on the right there, he could put down 6,000 rounds in 1 minute with that barrel. It's like a Gatling gun that spins around. You may be familiar with it or not. Okay, went through flight training, total of 9 months. With basic training, it was right at 11 months in the year. Toughest physically, mentally, and emotionally year of my life was flight school. 1, the aircraft itself, but 2, you knew what you were doing it for. And every instructor I had was already a Vietnam veteran, would talk to you about what it's going to be like when you get over there. Not only with the aircraft, how it flies, but emotionally and mentally, what you got to get yourself up for if you're going to go into combat. So I had a lot of experience in the skill levels. It was pretty good. We had about 300 hours flight time in the cockpit by that time. At the end of the 9 months, I was dual engine rated, I was instrument rated, and was certified in 3 different aircraft. So I could fly anything just about what I got assigned to over there. And as Jack pointed out, I was 19 years old. I had the world by the tail. Man, I was invincible, I felt. And I wasn't married, didn't even have girlfriends. Well, maybe I had a couple, 3. I was doing what I loved, and doing what I really wanted to do. So I felt pretty good about myself. So I had that mental attitude. I was at peace with myself. I knew this is what the Lord was wanting me to do, and I was ready to go for it. And come graduation day from flight school, when they pin those silver wings on your chest, you think you're pretty hot stuff. So that's where I was, and this is you can see this aircraft here. That's one of the. It wasn't that rock, but there we had a rock down off the coast in the mountains of Smoky Mountains down there. It was similar to this, where it was just wide enough to park your aircraft in it. You had to pass that before you could graduate. So it's kind of like the Navy guys. You got to jump off that 30-meter board into the water and swim to the side. There's certain tests that you do. You sweat bullets at until you pass it, because it's kind of the line in the sand which you're going to get to go in there. So I felt by the time we were ready to go that I was pretty well ready for going overseas and to do my mission as a helicopter pilot. And I honestly felt at that time I was not only a pilot, but as my instructor said, way back when I was flying Super Cub or Piper Cubs, that I was an Army aviator. I was an artist, and I could fly that helicopter like nobody's business, and I loved it. It was a good thing to do and a good feeling you have at 19, 20 years old. I look at these 19, 20-year-old kids today, and I'm not sure they could even find their way to the right bathroom, let alone go off to war at 19 years old and be expected to. How many of you got kids that are that age right now, or grandkids that age, with that expectation that they have about them? But the one thing I was not was untested in combat. You do not know what you're going to do when the shooting starts until it happens. Excuse me. And that was the one unknown thing you have in the back of your mind. Well, am I got the right stuff? Am I going to turn chicken, or am I going to actually fight when the time came? So that was the one thing I didn't have before going over there. So graduate from flight school, I go home on leave for 10 days, say goodbye to my parents and my family, and then it was off to Vietnam. So a pretty quick transition there. It was about April, I think, of '68 by now. And as George Patton said in the movie, Patton, there's a war going on over there, and I wanted to get into it. It was game on. It was time. No more sitting on the bench, no more practice and doing that. So here I'm at the same point in life where Joshua was, who incidentally was probably a helicopter pilot if he had one in those days. The Lord speaking to him, and it says, "Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened and do not be dismayed, for your Lord, your God, is with you wherever you go." I was pretty confident he wasn't going to sit down there on the end of the runway and say, "Okay, you go." He was going to go with me. Most satisfying feeling you could get if you're going to go off to war. I don't know how these guys did it without that, because I was just, it was nice to have that thought and know that he was with me. Wearing my silver wings there the first time I got in that uniform. These 4 guys that you see here in these brand new fatigues, see how green they are versus the one in the right picture. That gave you away right away. First week in country, you don't want to look like a rookie. But you didn't have, you wear this, you wanted to get them as sun faded as you could in doing it. Now, the death rate for pilots was 9 seconds. Combat infantrymen, from combat to your death was normally 7 seconds for an infantryman once the shooting started. For pilots, most of the average, like I said, there was over 6,000 of them died over there. They got it within the first 9 seconds. So life expectancy, helicopter pilots, 9 seconds during that time when I was over there. So you got that in the back of your mind. So, okay, I can do this. Those 4 guys there I went through flight school with, they went off. We ended up all at the same time up at Fort Lewis, Washington. And we're getting loaded up the aircraft, and the drill sergeant marched us all out on the tarmac and put us in a formation, gave us eyes right. So snap your eyes to right, and he said, you look at that soldier right there. He's probably going to be dead and not come back from Vietnam. Now, eyes left. You look at that guy. He's probably not going to come back either. So if you do come back, probably your buddies are not going to be. So that was kind of the pep talk he gave us before we went. And it almost held true. These 4 guys here, only one of them came back. So I never saw him again after this picture was taken and we got on the aircraft. So you get in the airplane, basically, and off we go. Now, put yourself in, put myself in pause here right now. There's basically 3 things I had going for me, which was really helpful in going to Vietnam, which gave me the strength to make it through. In my case, was my faith and the prayers of many. So we had a bunch of prayer warriors. My mom had the whole army out there in the city of prayer warriors that she gave updates to at church and everything. And you felt that. Mark 11:24 there, he said, therefore I tell you, wherever you ask in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it'll be yours. What a wonderful thought, and a promise he's gave us. 1 Corinthians 16:13, be watchful, stand firm in the faith, be courageous and strong. Again, soak in, works. Pack it away and use it every day. And of course, I knew my faith was for grace you've been saved through faith. My faith was strong at the time. I'd never doubted any time at all that he was not going to be with me. I had it down and deep in my heart, and it was just a huge asset if you're going off to combat. My family, of course, can't say enough about them. Wrote constantly, the loved letters that came from them, and knowing the support that I had from them coming by. And the last thing was the people you trained with. We're pretty tight by now, and we all got the same mission. We want to come home alive. So we're going to need each other to do that and keep each other's backs covered in doing it. My mother wrote this poem. My younger sister said she had it on my refrigerator door. The refrigerator door to her house. I never saw it until I came up to their house, and mom had passed away, and she had this tucked in one of her scrapbooks, and I still got it at home here and there. You read that prayer. I'm not going to do it because I'll cry. Your parents, we got a couple in the room right now that have people in the military overseas. You pray for those people. It's you can't describe how much it affects people, no matter what the circumstances are, whether you're going off to war or not. But that's it there. So if you had enough time to read it, I'm going to go on to the next one. Another thing here, the most quoted phrase in the Bible, do not be afraid. Fear not. It's written 365 times, one for every day of the year. It's a daily reminder from God to be fearless every day. And I thought, I'm going to be going over there, and within days after I get there, I'm going to be flying through the valley of the shadow of death, and I'm more likely going to be scared to death. So is that saying that I got less faith, that I should have a little more faith in God than that, and not be afraid or fear? It kind of bothered me for a while, and even lately, I had to get a hold of that verse to see if that really says anything. And so I looked up in the dictionary, what's the difference between being scared and being afraid? Is there a difference? And it's kind of, you can see the description here. Scared describes a sudden intense fear, while afraid indicates a general sense of fear or apprehension. I heard Scott say it on the podium before. I'm not afraid to die, and all of you have probably said that to yourself. So you're not afraid to die. Somebody come back through that door there right now and aimed a machine gun, start spraying it across here. I bet you every single one of you is going to be scared. You say you're not scared of snakes. They throw one at you and see if you got that or not. So the difference between, as it says here, is the sudden intense fear that you had. You're not any less faithful by showing fear if you do that. So I'm going to blow my nose, Dave, or Dale. All right, switch back on. Nope, got ahead of myself on that. I will fear no evil. So I'm knowing what I'm going to do when I go to Vietnam. It's pretty simple. I'm going to fight for the freedom of this country. That was the evil. The North Vietnamese were doing serious damage to liberties and the freedom of the people in the South Vietnam. And knowing he's with me, the rod and staff, they comfort me. He was going to protect me while I'm there. Of course, we have another famous Bible study teaching philosopher. He says, courage is being scared to death and saddling up anyway. Yeah, you're going to be scared, but you're going to do what you're trained to do and get out there and get after it. So I had that underneath me. I'm not going to worry too much about it. But one of my favorite verses, and I'll tear this apart sentence by sentence, but as Isaiah says in 28:31, have you not known? Have you not heard? The Lord is an everlasting God and the creator of the ends of the earth. He does not faint or grow weary. His understanding is unsearchable. He gives power to the faint, and to him who has no might, he increases strength. Even youth shall faint and be weary, and young men shall fall exhausted. But they do not wait for the Lord, shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with the wings of eagles, and shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint. So I kind of took that apart and put my own interpretation on it. It goes like this. John, don't you know anything? Haven't you heard? Is that me? No. Have you not heard? Listen up. Take this truth and run with it. Knowing God is important. He doesn't get tired. He knows everything. Trust in him. He gives power and strength to even wussies like me. He is enough. When I'm tired, weary, exhausted, I need to seek him because he can and will renew my strength and energy every time. Even at age 19, I can take off on the wings of a helicopter and soar like an eagle. I can fly into that valley all day long, and he will help me stay focused, be brave, and he will give me unlimited courage and the skills I need to fly with great confidence and stay focused and not lose self-control. The way I felt, and I think that's maybe a little stretch on some of those interpretations, but it worked for me. Okay, so we're ready to go Vietnam. Ready to go? Notice by some of you wiggling around there, we may need to take a break and go tuck your tail shirts in, and we'll be back in, say, 10 minutes. What do you think? So, break time. When you come back, we're going to Vietnam. Show you some experiences that we had over there. What's that?
I have a pilot's license. I got it in the 80s.
I got to come around there. I can't hear you.
I said, I
Okay, if y'all wander back in here, we'll get started for second half. Second half is long, so we can have everybody out of here in time to eat dinner. Okay. Okay, for you younger generation, if you don't know where Vietnam is, look up there on the map. It's right below China, below South Korea, and below Japan over there north of the Indonesian islands. And you can see Australia down there. I'll give you a bearing kind of where it's at. Anyway, it's the time, to me, it was just a country 12,000 miles away. I had no idea what Vietnam was or whole at all when I got drafted into the Army. I thought it was an exciting thing to do because I wanted to get overseas. I'd never left the state of Nebraska except to fly over to Sioux City one time on a cross-country trip. So, that was a big adventure for me to go in. So I'll just quickly go through some of this, but the flight over took 36 hours. We went from Washington State, Seattle area. We took off there, went to Anchorage, Alaska. If you fly the global route instead of the shortcut across Hawaii there, you see on the map. Refueled in Alaska. We took off in Seattle. It was April, so it was probably 80s. Alaska was below zero. There we just got off the airplane and walked into the terminal there to refuel the aircraft. It was just freezing cold. Then went to Japan, and again it was freezing cold. And then we landed in Vietnam, of course, and it's a tropical climate there. But Vietnam itself is only about 1,200 miles long. Take and fly a straight line from here to the Mexican border. That's about how long it is. You fly from here to Hastings, Grand Island, I mean. That's about how wide the country is. So you get an idea and reference of what we're talking about. Yeah, wrong direction. Okay, so just briefly summarize, the Vietnam War started in 1955, went to 1975, 20-year war. Combat really only started, though, in 1965, 10 years later. So heavy action was basically 1968 to 1972 was when most of the casualties occurred. We had over 500,000 people over there at the time. Ho Chi Minh was the ruler of the North. President Kennedy, of course, was in the presidency of the United States, and then President Tu, he was president of the South. Now, the South was, when the French had this country in World War II, they took over the colonized it during World War II, or right after World War. The Japanese occupied the country during World War II. The French came in, colonized it, basically raped the land, just took all of its assets, natural assets, and just took all their trees, their rubber trees, the plantations were all raising rice, all that stuff left the country and do it. But South Vietnam was declared when French left. They came to a peace agreement that they'd build the DMZ, a line up by north of Da Nang up there, and that was anybody want to be on the north was going to be a communist led by Ho Chi Minh. If you wanted to be a freedom, live in freedom and liberty, you moved to the south, and that was going to be part of the country. So peace agreement was signed. Everybody agreed that's what was going to happen. And as soon as they went home, from the French went home, North Vietnam started violating their contract right away on the peace agreement. So the North Vietnamese started heading south, and if you didn't want to be a communist, then they'd kill you. So as simple as that. And the United States got into it because of the South with being a free country, and the idea at the time is, or the threat at the time was, that communism was going to take over the world. And they were just going to start with South Vietnam, and it would be the domino effect, Cambodia, Thailand, across Asia. If we didn't stop them here, we weren't going to be able to stop them anywhere. So that was a trick. My station, I had orders to go to Dong Va Tien, go to the 92nd Replacement Company, pick up my orders from there, and we'd be distributed into the rest of the country. Now, most of the thing, when I was, all through flight school, nobody ever talked about Vietnam itself, just the enemy situation. I did not realize until I looked out the window and we're on final into Cameron Bay, just how beautiful the country was. We came in, circled around, came back in and landed that runway right there. And it was all these beautiful white sand beaches, aqua blue water, looked like it landed in Gulf of Mexico. Just beautiful out the window. So it kind of, I was figuring I was going to land and bullets would be flying all over and I'd get killed before I even got off the airplane. That's kind of what most people thought when they were going over there, and they're scared like that. So I got my orders, got sent up to Da Nang, and then they eventually came down here, and this is where I was stationed for almost 3 years. I'll skip a lot of the other stories that happened before this, but where that red dot is where my hooch was. When I moved in there, though, none of these buildings were there. It was all time, we lived in tents and stuff, and then as time went along, we got better housing and that going in there. When I came home, these houses you see on the left here, they called them hooches, were 24 men to a hooch, and when we first went in there, they were just bunk beds with no mattresses. Later on, we got mattresses, and we started living a little bit better every year. The ingenuity of the Americans, they're going to live a little better than living in tents, so we went at it that way. This was my tent the first year. Little last time, you talk about sacrifice. You're gonna go fight a war. There's things that aren't going to be too comfortable. And the living conditions is one of them. As you see here, we were issued a pup tent, helmet, and a weapon. We had an M16 rifle, and then you had a sleeping bag and a mosquito net. That was everything you owned was in that tent. And you got one per person, and we just had them lined up alongside the runway. And we found out that didn't work too good because every time a Chinook would come in and land, he'd blow the tent down. So you start to see we put sandbags on top of the thing, you got it in. And every time it rained, your tent got soaking wet inside, and your sleeping bag come home. That's what you had to sleep in for the night. So you just lay out on the ground somewhere and sleep on the ground. The next level of housing that we got was these culverts, and just big, okay. Where's my pointer button? Here we go. This was the Quonset huts, or what do you call culverts, right? Steel, half steel. We got into those 2 men, 2 room. You can see the cots there. We didn't have to sleep on the ground anymore. And if we wanted to avoid the heavy rains and that, we would we'd borrow the pallets from the Navy down the road. We go down there with trucks, and we'd get all their midnight requisition, all the pallet wood that they'd have down there, and bring it back. And we had a pretty good life. So by now, though, we're inside this thing, and we started to get hit by mortars and rockets at night. Not every night, but 3-4 times a week. Enough to keep you awake and nervous. We started throwing all these sandbags on top of these bunkers, or these billets here. and we're just getting started here. Normally you have about 4 layers on there. If a mortar landed right on top of it, you wouldn't kill you inside inside on your cot. Well, then we moved up to a Holiday Inn over here. We got a GP medium tent, 4 men to a tent. Again, more wood. We even got lawn chairs from the Air Force, and they helped us out with a heater stove where we could heat the water up on that tank there, and we could shave with the there. So, and we did this for about the first 8 months I was there, and then they started building those buildings, and away they would go, and we'd move into better quarters as we went along. Like I said, the final quarters that we went into were these. Where am I at? Over here. There you go. This was the final barracks that they built for the pilots and the enlisted guys. They had tin roofs on them. They were open bay to start with, and then they ended up putting individual rooms in there where you could put 4 men to a room. And they built, we put all these sandbags on the top because just about a week after they got the tin roofs on the first time, this typhoon comes through, 100-mile-an-hour winds, blew the lid all off, and we had to redo the whole roof. And then they decided the sandbags up there would probably hold it down, and that worked pretty good. You can see them out here. Mama San filling the sandbags up right now, and then it's pretty hard to see right here. But at the end of every one of these barracks, we built these bunkers, 12-man, 14-man, 15-man bunkers. So we start getting hit at night. Bunkers, everybody was get out of your bunk and run down and jump in the bunker and hold on until the mortar stopped, and then we'd get out. Then you had these little individual bunkers that were out along the runway and around where the guards that protected our border and those things were pretty effective too. So you never knew when you was going to get hit. So if you're down there working at night and you get hit and you just jumped in the nearest one and doing that. Here's John Kev. John was one of the pilots in our unit. You can see here we got wood bunks, but we didn't have any mattresses. We finally ended up getting mattresses after a couple, 3 months. We borrowed a couple of them from one of the Marine Corps guys that were coming through, so we're happy to relieve him of those. And then by this time, we got electricity. Man, I couldn't believe it. We were without electricity the whole time up until that time, so you could plug your radio in, and then everything you owned was limited to that foot locker right there. And you really didn't need anything other than your fatigues, which you had 1 pair on and 1 pair in the laundry. Wear 1 pair of fatigues for a week, usually 2 weeks. Pretty ripe by the end of that time. And but everybody else is ripe, so you don't care. You stink as bad as I stink. We're okay. So that was what our hooches looked like. That was our living conditions. It got better as time went along, and we would end up spending very little time in these barracks because we were flying quite a bit and didn't have time to really enjoy the monitors and doing it. The showers were pretty primitive. 55-gallon tank or oil tank, and cleaned it out, and we had a 55-gallon water tank on top of the wood shed or wood structure there, and 50 men would shower off that. You'd jump in, you'd unplug the cork, put a gallon of water or so, just a couple of seconds, get yourself wet, soap yourself down, put the plug back in, plug back out, clean the soap off, put the plug back in. If you did it very much longer than that, the guy waiting right behind you was on you because somebody was going to go without a shower if you stayed there that long. So that's where that was. And then we moved up. We got this solar-powered shower after that. And we had 2 55-gallon barrels. Then we could stay just a little bit longer. So that was life in the fast lane. A lot of times, we lived real close to the beach. We just go down, jump in the ocean, and that was a lot better taking a bath in the salt water than getting the shower anyway. But the fire truck would come back and fill that tank up twice a day from water from a well. Okay, no outhouse. I mean, you've all experienced this pleasure, I'm sure, in your life sometime or another. No plumbing, no sewer, no privacy. The wastes were pulled out from underneath you in the barrel. They'd pour a JP4 in there, light the thing up. That smell hung with you, and I'll recognize it in a heartbeat. If I smell it anymore, you never forget it. And that. We had ladies from the village up the road, mostly teenage girls, that would come down and do our washing. They'd stick your clothes in the thing, pour soap on top, step on top, bound on it for a little bit, and then hang it up and the soap and everything else. It was not a very good clean. One of the greatest luxuries in coming home was to put on a pair of clothes that was clean and didn't smell bad. So this is the normal dress of a Vietnamese person. I didn't get any guys in this, I guess, because just didn't find any, but they're all out wearing soldier suits anyway for the most part. So wildlife in Vietnam is abundant, and if you've been around a tropical climate, everything's bigger when you're doing it. That's a cockroach there, yes. Had one of these come crawling across my face one night. I didn't know what it was. I grabbed that thing and it was terrifying in doing that. Boa constrictors, snakes were either boas, or we had one of the most dangerous snakes in the world. You see here, it's called the bamboo viper. And the nickname for it was bite you 2 steps and you're basically gone. Very deadly, and I didn't see very many of them, but when you did, everybody was in full attention to where they were, and they'd usually get killed right away. Centipedes bite you. They had claws on the front of them like that. Spiders were, unbelievable spiders over there. The annual rainfall in Vietnam, 90 to 120 inches. Rained almost every day except for the dry season. And you get 3 or 4 inches, you're always wet. Just hang around about 10 minutes, sun will come out, dry you out, and you just keep on going. You just got used to doing that. The lowest temperature ever got over there was 92. It's hot and humid. Humidity is probably up in the 80s and 90s most of the time too. But you wonder, how do you fight in those conditions? You don't. You just get used to it. You don't let it bother you. You just got to continue on. And after you're there about a month, you really, like I said, I didn't think I wasn't bothered by it so much after you did get used to it. Some of the other wildlife, we had huge rats would come into the compounds. You had to keep food away from them. You're doing that. Bats, of course. Monkeys everywhere when you get out into the jungle, of course, and you get out toward the Cambodian border. We had elephants around. Bengal tigers weren't uncommon. And I don't know what this thing is on the right. It'd wash up on the beach during the typhoons and stuff, storms. So got a picture of that thing. I think anybody know what a gar is? Adam, does that look like a gar to you? I know must be a part of the species anyway, but it's a saltwater fish, I'm pretty sure. Okay, and then where did we eat? Very seldom did I get a hot meal in the 3 years I was there. Maybe 3 times a month. But we would leave, we'd get up in the morning, 4:30, 5 o'clock, go out, pre-flight the aircraft, take off, and the mess hall would open at 6. So they would either make stuff for us and bring it out to the aircraft before we take off, scrambled eggs usually, or most of the time we just carried sea rations around with us. And the sea rations weren't too bad. And if you ever eaten them, they're nutritious. They keep you healthy. And in a pack of sea rations in those days, you can see what came with it. You got sugar, salt and sugar, matches, pack of cigarettes, a lifesaver, chocolate. Like you see in this one, beans and wieners was in the big can. A little can might have a cookie or two, and the medium-sized can would have some kind of fruit cocktail or something in there. So you'd have to open these cans up. We kept a P-38 can opener on your dog tags all the time, so you always had something to open the cans with. Otherwise, you're a mess. But the most important thing in the whole thing was that spoon. See that plastic spoon there? That got used for many things, multiple things doing that. You took a took sea rations with you and you ate them whenever you could. We'd be flying back and forth to different LZs and stuff, and you'd be eating on the way. So we didn't really stop for a break unless we had an opportunity to do so. Haircuts right out in the open. The local Vietnamese barber would come out and we'd pay him 10 cents for a haircut. Sleep. You see the guys here, you slept whenever you could. Seemed like you're always tired, never had a good night's rest unless you got some days off. C model Chinook Company, I went over this earlier, I guess. We got 180 men, 36 pilots, and 124 enlisted, 16 aircraft, and a Bell Ranger. That was everybody had a call sign. Mine was Freight Train, and I was number 11. Freight Train 11 was my call sign. And last week, this unit, I don't know how many of the guys are in that picture, we got together in Omaha. 53 people showed up and counting their wives. Had a great reunion, got nice shirts to go with them, and encouraged me to wear mine today. So here we go.
53 including the wives.
Yeah. So I think 34 pilots or 34 crewmen, pilots and enlisted were all together in that. Okay, so what was my job with this helicopter? Basically 3 things. Fly combat assaults. The most intense thing you'll do when you're in Vietnam was to fly the troops right up to the enemy's face. Take them right into the jungle, drop them off in front, come back, resupply them, which was the second mission, get them the beans and the bullets and the barbed wire, whatever they needed. You'd fly that all day long. And then the third thing was when the aircraft got shot down, which was pretty often, and they were normally shot down in the woods somewhere on an LZ or on a mountaintop. And if they were recoverable, they'd go out and hang a strap to it. As you can see there, our Chinook could pick them right up and fly away with it. And they'd fix up whatever was damaged on it, and it would fly again. So they did that quite often. Of the 3,800 hours I got over there, 40% of it, I'm just estimating, was doing combat assaults. About 50% of that time was doing resupply, and 10% of the time was doing aircraft recovery. I don't know, lost track after a while, but I'd recovered over 30 aircraft myself in the time period I was over there, more than most people in that. Typical day, we'd wake up, as mentioned earlier, we sleeping in your bunks. The officer of the day, the guard, would come around and shake your toe and wake you up and say, it's time to go. If it was a 6 o'clock takeoff, which most of the time was, we'd take off right at dark. As soon as it was daylight coming up where you could see it, we'd take off, go out and fly wherever we were going to go that day. Sometimes you'd have 20, 30 loads that you were going to carry out. If we're going to fly combat assault, you had to get there usually most of them started between 7 and 8 o'clock in the morning and doing that. Night operations was dangerous over there. I mean, it was the most scariest things you did was fly at night because there's no electricity out there. And so you'd fly out unless the guy had a campfire. It was just pitch black. And when you get close to where you were supposed to be going, somebody would shine a light up and we'd see the light and you knew right where they were. And then you'd fly down and land and do whatever you was being sent out there to do. But normally when you did night operations, I mean, I got 180 hours of flying at night over there. The night operations that I flew were all emergency situations. A fire base is being overrun, running out of ammo. They got a bunch of people wounded. Get out there, drop off all 9,000 pounds of ammo, pick up their wounded, and come back. It's intense, very skill. Every skill you had in learning how to fly came into play on those night missions. We had guys, the pilots that were very responsible and good pilots in my unit, but they liked to drink. And if they came in at night off of a mission, or came in during the daytime, been out flying 10, 12 hours and that, they'd go in and hit the bottle, or in that case, the tin cans. So if they were drunk or been drinking anything, then they wouldn't have to fly that night. And So me and Dale Christenberry, one of the other guys that Ann knew, he introduced me to Ann actually, is neither one of us drank, and they knew we didn't drink. And so we put ourselves on the board. I wanted to fly, so let's go fly tonight. Practice is the best flying you can possibly get where it demands your most skills. And so we got more nighttime than anybody else in the unit did and got the respect for that. Where was I going with that? Oh, yeah, that the morality of the Army pilots was not exactly the highest because they would do things that would get them off the hook. Body recovery, more detail they called it, was something we did on occasion. Usually if a fire base got overrun or there was a big artillery attack or mortar attack, bodies would stack up. And sometimes they'd be 2 or 3 days ripe by the time we got to them. You can see here they're just laid out like that. We'd come in and land, and 3 or 4 guys would come out and throw them on board, and we'd have to fly them into wherever the nearest morgue was, which was usually in Cameron, and fly them back with that. So that was dirty duty, smelly. Most of the time they would stick them in body bags, and I'm not sure why these weren't, but probably because they didn't have time to put them in. So crew rest was important to us. If you flew 150 hours, inside of 30 days, you'd get 3 days crew rest, if there was enough pilots around to do it. Otherwise, you just broke that rule and you kept on going. Most of the time, they were able to honor it. But there's times when things were tense over there that we flew 40, 50, 60 days in a row without ever getting any day off. So that was expected. The unit was expected to launch 8 to 10 aircraft every day. And 16 to 20 line pilots flew every day in the cockpit. So if you had 36 pilots, which we never had, I don't think we ever had more than 25 pilots in the unit, there wasn't a lot of time to get off because we had to first, by all means, fly the aircraft for the missions that day. In an average year, a pilot would fly into a combat zone at least 300 days. So you think about it, you got 65 days off or about 2 months off that you weren't flying. I mean, there were never more than 3 days in a row that I ever got off into it. And you'd log about 1,300 hours. So if you're familiar with flying, you got to fly a lot to get 1,000 hours in unless you're an airline pilot. And lots of things over there could kill you besides combat. Fatigue, complacency were top of the list. Making stupid mistakes that sometimes you did it because you're overtired. You just had to be really careful. Sleep when you could. Like I said, weather was a big time. You can see the storm there and the storm there. With a helicopter was kind of nice because the fixed wing, if you fly into a storm, you better be going into a 180 turn or climbing on top of it because you're going to get thrown out. Otherwise, helicopter, you just descend down to the trees and you just sit there and hover. Wait till the storm goes by and then take off again, going out of there. So it's a lot safer as far as storms go in a helicopter than a fixed wing. Wildlife, we went over that already. Accidents, people just did stupid things. Showing off. I said most of these guys are 19, 20, 21 years old, so they're not very mature as far as that goes in some of that. Now, the last thing you didn't want to do was go into a combat assault situation, get shot down, crash into the jungle, and get captured and become a prisoner of war. That was something I never wanted to do and never be faced with, and I came close a couple times, but was able to get out of the situation I was in. Brownouts is another one. Here's what a brownout looks like. Coming into a hover, and of course you got 125 mile an hour winds blowing underneath that helicopter. Big fan there. Just blow. If it's a real dry season, it would just blow that dirt up. And you can see you can go IFR or instrument flight rules in a heartbeat. And then it all can happen with smoke if there's smoke around and you get in there. So it's happened on several occasions where a helicopter would taxi or hover into another one. Normally, what you'd send one in, get his load, pull out before the next one would come in. But if they're loading hot and heavy, there would be more than one in that. So, what's that? Oh yeah, big time. Yeah, every night we'd come in, there'd be a fire truck out there waiting for you with a fire hose or with a water hose, and fired in those engines and clean them out every night. I was over there in 3 years. I lost 11 engines. Engines out were pretty standard, and replacing engines was big time because of the sand damage. Early on, first year or so I was there, I didn't have covers on the engines either. And you come in to hover like that, if there were loose sandbags around, those things would fly up, and boy, they just sucked into the engine. You're in trouble, because if you're picking up a heavy load, you're lost an engine, you're in a critical envelope side of the aircraft. So that happened occasionally on that. So the terrain over there, 60% mountains, thick jungle. It's everything that's advertised with the tropical climate. Jungle so thick it's 3 canopies thick sometimes. Emergency procedure was, if you lost an engine or were going to crash and there's no flat land or no other option to you, you go right into the trees. You just hover in and go in backwards. And normally you would never hit the ground because the jungle is so thick. So it's pretty safe. The worst problem you had then was getting out of the aircraft and getting down to the ground so you could get rescued down in there. We went over the temperature, rainfall. Economy is mostly agriculture there. It's been said that if there was no war going on in Cambodia or in the North and South Vietnam, they could raise enough rice to feed the world. And it's really rich soil, and there's enough land to do that. And the flooding is in perfect conditions for raising rice. The French came in and planted hundreds and thousands of acres of rubber trees. Like I said, they would harvest them and take all the rubber back to France. Michelin Michelin Tire Company was the one that did that. Population of the course and doing it was 96 million. Okay, going to take you along. I thought, share with you a little bit of what it's like to fly a combat assault. I can't ever begin to make you feel it, but at least I can explain it to you and you maybe imagine it, what it's like. A combat assault is, as I said earlier, it's what you're going to do with the troops. You pick them up and you fly them into the combat system. It's like D-Day. You get load up all the boats, boom across there to Normandy, and you take them on where they're dug in. Well, that's what happens here. But instead, because the road system is so poor over there, the reason they call it a helicopter war is because the only way the troops could get out into the jungle and get after them was if they did a combat assault. So the mission usually was you'd have a day or so warning about this so you'd gear up for it. As we'd fly into a fire base somewhere or a fire support base, load up troops, load up ammunition, load up artillery, whatever we're going to take out to the field, fly it out to an LZ or a landing zone, drop everybody off. Hopefully they make contact. And, of course, the mission is to kill and capture North Vietnamese, whatever army was out there, to bring it close to the mission. So that was what you do. And this is I'll take you along on the first one I went on, and this is this is like 2 weeks after I got there. You hear about combat assaults, all the instructors tell you about combat assaults, and now I'm going to go on my first one. And we went up into Happy Valley, and it was called Happy Valley because they captured a bunch of North Vietnamese up in there, and they all had drugs on them. Marijuana bags, they all had drugs, and they called them happy because they were all, hey, we're going to fight today. So Happy Valley was a real dangerous part of the area that I was in because the Ho Chi Minh Trail came right down through there. And the Ho Chi Minh Trail was the supply route. That's all the soldiers from North Vietnam and all their supplies came down the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And they usually were very concealed and very savvy on moving these supplies down there and sneaking into the country, not finding it, because they figured out a way to get underneath those jungles and build roads underneath them where you couldn't see them from the air. Typical mission, though, you would fly troops out, then you'd fly the artillery out, you set up artillery would support the troops, and then after a week or two, when they weren't able to do any more destruction against them, you go out and fly them and bring them all back in. So that was your typical mission. Normally you had 3 or 4 LCs you'd go into. Of course, they all gave them funny names, but Charlie, in our case, I just made up some here. LZ, Charlie, Lima, and X-ray. And because the Vietnamese were coming down the valley, the best place you can put them on is on the hilltop. So you can fight downhill, and they'd have to fight uphill in doing that. This is the real Happy Valley. It's about 200 miles north of Saigon, and this is where I'm going to go in for our first combat assault. You can see this. It's the dark. There's a big LZ right there, a big tree that there. I mean, there's no trees in this top of this mountaintop here. This one over here, they were going to have to blast the trees away to get into it. And this one here, it's underneath the clouds, was just a little patch where you could fly a helicopter, a Huey in, and drop off troops. It's a little better than that picture you see right there. Just pretty small. I could not land a Chinook in there if I had to. We have to I'll show you in a little bit what it looks like to be able to do that, how we had to go about doing it. We started early in the morning, spring of May 68. Just like I said, 2 weeks after I got over there, I'm going to fly my first combat assault. The PZs were hit up on Anke, so you line everybody up and you get them ready to go, and it's going to get real busy here in a little bit. We're going to line up about 800 aircraft are going to be confined into this 5-mile circle area. So chances of getting shot at are much less than your chances of having a mid-air collision. You're got your full neck out on the swivel, looking around for other aircraft getting close to you, so you can get out of there. So you not only got the danger of somebody shooting at you, but you also got the danger of having a mid-air collision while you're up there. He said when that many aircraft come into a tight little area, you got to have a plan, and the plan better work. And if weather comes in, interferes with it, they usually call these big combat assaults off. But when you line everybody up, well, the people have got to be in the right place. The gasoline for the aircraft have to be in place, and of course the ammunition, the rockets, everything we're going to need for they have to be in order. And there's an order to every bit of this. And if you've done, like I said, by the end of the 3 years I was over there, I'd done over 400 of these. So some of them were huge like this. Some of them were just 5 or 10 aircraft, and so it was a lot easier to do it. But we'd line up, get everybody ready to go, and then usually right first in the morning you'd have somebody get on a radio and say it's time to launch. When it's time, normally you'd prep the LZs with B-52s that fly over and just drop tons of ammunition down in there. Then the artillery would stop on top of them, and then the gunships would come in and do their thing, and then the slicks would put the people in, and then we come in last. So it's pretty organized how you do it. If something goes wrong, it's probably going to. Again, John Wayne, a famous philosopher, says, you don't be a man to be a fool to bring a knife to a gunfight. These aircraft here were unbelievable. The Cobras, they could put down more firepower. And that morning when we did this, it was basically their orders were it's a free fire zone. If you see it, kill it or blow it up, one of the two. So which is just what a helicopter pilot flying gunships wants to hear. So that's what their job was to do. Get to the pickup zone. Everybody's on. Yeah, the call sign for the guy that leads the thing is Charlie Charlie. Command and control is what that stands for. When he gives the order to launch, load and launch, it's time to turn and burn, time to crank the aircraft up, and it's time to make this combat assault go into action. You got medevac birds on standby, and you're expecting to make contact with the enemy, and these guys be the first ones to fly in and get the wounded and the casualties out. Chinooks all line up. We take off after the Hueys do, so that's all part of the sequence. when you got this many Chinooks out there, it's hard to get the troops lined up to get the right one in the right aircraft. And normally the crew chief would stand back there with a number. Line number 1, you're in this aircraft, you're going to land at LZ Lima. You know, if you got in the wrong aircraft, you end up in the wrong place. And you didn't have a very effective fighting force if they ended up going to the wrong place. So there's a lot going on, and it has to work, and the timing has to be pretty good. Here we go again. Okay, Dale. I'm holding the button down. There we go. Now it's going to go flip 3 or 4, right? Yeah. I'll jump. There we go. All right. All right. So once it's launch time and you take off, this is the hardest part when you're in the air with the troops. You're going into the LZ, and now it's D-Day. I mean, we're going to go right into the faces of the enemy out there, and you don't know what to expect. Whether there may be tens of thousands of them down there, there may be only 2. You know, you don't know what you're going after, and hopefully the intelligence has done a good job of finding out what's out there. But you got about 10 to 15, sometimes as many as 30 minutes, a quiet time, I called it, before you make the evasion. And that's when prayers come into effect. You say your prayers now, because once the action starts, it's time to do. And once the troops get on the ground, it's insertion on the way, and it was just funny for me is how these guys would ride in these aircraft, just hanging their feet out there, waving at the crowd as they're going by underneath. They're going into combat for the most part, but they're pretty brave souls in doing that. Aircraft are identified. You can see here this tail here. They would put those on. So when they load the aircraft, they know which ones are going on. But once you take off and there's 25 other Hueys out there, which one is yours? Which ones do you follow? That was the markings. And same way we learned that from World War II on the D-Day invasion, that you had to mark the tails of those aircraft in order to keep track of who was who out there. So we're just about to insert. The Hueys are all lined up, usually 25, 30 of them in a row. Each one of them has got 12 packs on board. They're going to, in the areas we're going to, because the LZs were small, they're going to land one aircraft at a time coming in. He's going to come in, the Huey, first one in, is going to land, let his troops out. He's got about 2 seconds on the ground. So that's why when they're hanging on the skids like that, when they come off, they can unload 14 people off a Huey in about 3 seconds. You know, that's about the time they've got to get on the ground. Otherwise, they're going to be jumping out when their aircraft is in the air. Sometimes the aircraft never touches down. Just depends on the rugged terrain underneath of them. But you wait for the call sign. Charlie will come up and say, you know, Blue Star 0, we are Tango. We're 2 to touchdown. In other words, we're 2 minutes out. Heads up, full alert. Go full alert and get your heads on a swivel, because stuff's about to start here, more than likely. So it's pretty intense. The Hueys are all lined up, and we're lined up, the Chinooks right behind them. So depending on what the LZ was and how big it was, sometimes you could get 2 of them in there. Most of the time it was just 1. We're coming in with 60 troops. I got Koreans on board. They were fighting the fighting force that day. I had 60 of them on board, and each Chinook behind me had 16 troops on board, or 60 troops on board. So we're coming in. We're going to put a lot of troops on the ground real fast, which is what you want to do if you're going up against a force that's maybe bigger than you are, to get as many in there as you can. B-52s dropping bombs. The jets are coming in, dropping bombs. The jets are firing artillery coming in on that. So a lot of smoke out there. And this starts to clear. That's what the 2-minute warning is. You start inbound. Once you start inbound, there's no turning back now. You get that first lead aircraft in, has got to make the decision whether you make the go or not. If he goes in under heavy fire going in, he's more than likely going to turn, and everybody's got to turn and come out of there and go to plan B, which is another LZ somewhere. So it's critical that firing of all the explosives coming down out of the sky keeps their heads down, and their ears are ringing, and they're picking up and body parts and everything else. They're busy. They're not going to take you on an aircraft flight of aircraft coming in unless they've dug in real deep, which is a possibility. They could be. So they're not even affected by all the bombs coming in. So here they are. We're lined up. Blue Star 01 makes the call, Tango Tango. Here we go. My first combat assault. We are, I don't know, it's probably 300, 400 feet lined up to come in to the LZ. First aircraft in lands on a booby trap or an explosive round, or an IED as they call them today. It was a 105 howitzer round we found. We found several of these afterwards on the ground. And this is not a picture that was taken that day, but it would be very similar to that. And there'd be a bomb planted under the ground here. And there's the artillery shell. They reckoned afterwards what was what got him. He landed. Here's what it looks like. They put the artillery shell in the ground. They filed down the firing pin and put a nail or something in there. So all it takes is a little pressure. Set the thing off. It explodes. And as you can see, the aircraft goes bouncing in the air and ends up upside down, killing everybody on board. So the explosion itself, you can see the condition of the LZ. It's pretty rough. Most of that's done by explosives from the B-52s that damaged, all that in there. And it's just amazing that the B-52s bombs that came down didn't set the thing off. But there it was, and the first aircraft in bounces up in the air and everybody sees it. So what do you do now? Well, you continue on. You can't just quit. Now we're going to keep the fight going, and safest thing you can do is land right where he lands. So everybody starts dropping every troop on top of him. They're all going into the woods, and everything seems to be on schedule for getting the rest of the flight in there and getting their troops in the board. I saw him go up. He's a mile ahead of me. I seen that aircraft come up and just boom go in. So the intensity of my heart rate probably doubled when I seen that, because I know this is going to be my first experience with real combat. So Chinook comes in. This picture is not the real thing. I found one that's close to, very similar to what we were going to do. Troops are on the ground. You can see from the picture on the left there. And we're coming in and we're just about to set our troops down. So the LZ is busy. There's probably over 180 people in the LZ now, people running around, taking positions, the defensive positions in the trees. Nobody's shooting at us. Pretty calm as far as some of the LZs I've been into before, where you run into heavy fire right on short final, and it gets pretty intense that way. So the LZ we're going into, it looks a lot like this one here. Here we go. Now it works just fine, doesn't it? Give away my thunder here. Oh, there we go. You can see it's just big enough to put a Huey in here, or a Chinook in here. And so we could land there, maybe even get two in there, but you don't try it because of the rotary effect and that one and that. But you're right on the edge of a mountain. And you get in there, and I'm the first one in, and my aircraft commander, he's saying, okay, you're looking good, move to the right, we'll sit down right over there. He says, put your aft two wheels on the side of the hill, because we got to let everybody out the back end. So I figured that all out, and I'm hanging on to dear life to make sure I can fly this aircraft and do it right. And so that's what it would look like, to give you an idea. The LZ, and of course the mountain goes straight down here. So this is the way I set the aircraft down. We put the two back wheels on the side about right here, and the troops could run out and go into the LZ. So we did that, and you can see it here. This is not the actual picture again, but what it does look like when you are doing that. So I'm sitting here. I look in the rearview mirror, which is, as you see, is right up there. You can look back into the aircraft and see what's going on with the troops unloading. Now, I've been trained to get these guys off the airplane as fast as you can, because if they got that bore-sighted with a mortar round, they can drop a mortar round right on the ground. And he knows he's going to get 60 people with one shot if he does that. So he drops it, I drop him out, and away we go. So I got the wheels on the ground. I look in the rearview mirror, and boom, the aircraft, somebody stepped on a second one, exploded. Aircraft, the rotor blades cut the aircraft in half. That's not my aircraft that I was flying that day because mine burned to the ground. But he jumps, you can see here, when your rotor blade decides to bend forward, it can cut your aircraft right in two, which is what saved my life, actually. Aircraft went rolling down the mountain. Rotor blade was turning and then spinning up and having dirt and stuff, and I can't see anything, and I'm totally confused what the world just happened. And rolled down the hill. I unbuckle, and we ended up upside down like that. Yeah.
You weren't in command of this.
No, we had. Like I said, I've been in the country only 2 weeks inside the country, so I'm the greenhorn. I'm the co-pilot. Yeah, and the instructor pilot was the one that Clyde Love was, who his name was. But what's that?
You survived?
Both of us did. Both of us did. Don't jump ahead of me, Jack. We're going to get there. I know you're on the front of your seat.
Are you alive?
Yes, am I still alive? I don't know. Yeah, we survived this. However, all the passengers in the back, all 60 of them, including my 2 door gunners and my crew chief, this isn't my aircraft again. You can see we're up in the mountains here, but we're not on that hill and that. But when a Chinook catches fire, we had 6,000 pounds of fuel on board. It doesn't take long to burn it to the ground. I came walking. I went over. My co-pilot or my aircraft commander was. We were hanging there like that, and he's not moving. So I don't know if he's alive or dead. I unbuckled, fell out of the aircraft, came around to that side, and he was moving by then. He come to, and we had to climb about 50 yards up that hill, and we got rescued in by a Huey, came in, picked us up, took us back. 2 hours later, gave us another helicopter, and we're back out there. Yeah. So that's the kind of grit we had in those days.
So John, you're 19, 20 years of age, and 90% of the people you're with are that age.
Mm-hmm.
Was there anybody 30, 40, 50?
Oh, yeah. The sergeants, the senior sergeants, probably Charlie, he's a full colonel usually when he's got this many aircraft in the air. They're the senior NCOs are, E8s and E9s. They've been in for 10, 15 years by then. So there is experienced people out there. But the normal infantrymen, the ones that do the dirty work are 18, 19, 20, 21 years old for the most part. Leadership is older. It's a good question, though, because just like my leadership in the aircraft commanders were normally second tour people. They've been, they're in their 40s and 50s, and like I said, they've been flying in World War II, some of them. So they're very experienced and elderly people on that. So once we went back, picked up our other aircraft, got back in the game, and went out and started resupplying all the deals. So that was a typical combat assault works, but the amount of a firepower that goes in, and once the shooting starts, they like to shoot down aircraft. They love to shoot helicopters down. And they now know by 1968 where to aim to do it. The door gunner is the first guy you take out because he's shooting back at you. Once you got him, then you take the pilots out, and then you got the aircraft and everything inside of it. So once you start that approach, your 9 seconds starts. As I mentioned earlier that the average lifespan of a helicopter pilot was 9 minutes or 9 seconds. So pretty intense. That day, we ran into a whole lot of enemy situations, a lot of shooting going on. This is my buddy that I fly in the unit with. He took what we thought was probably an AK or a RPG 37 round right through the windshield, went right over his head, and got some splinters in his eye, and you see his helmet. Shrapnel went right through the top of his helmet. Could have given him a haircut real good there. The Charlie model gunships got all shot up. You see this cockpit took 3 rounds. There's a bunch of bullet holes along in here. It was pretty intense out there. And guess what? We get $64 a month for that, $2 a day combat pay. We earn every dime of it, I think. Get free food, free uniforms. Okay, so this is what the end of the day turns out. They captured a bunch of them. The last mission I had coming out of there was prisoners of war. And the North Vietnamese army was not very well trained. For the most part, they're 19, 20-year-old, even 16-year-olds toward the end of the war and doing it. Not very well fed or equipped with fight. They're fighting with these old AK-47s and these old Chinese World War II hand grenades. And they're going up against F-4 fighters and B-52 bombers and American weaponry, and still did not give up. We totally underestimated what the grit was of the North Vietnamese soldier. He's fighting for his country, and we were too, but only for our freedom so much, but not on our own soil. And so they were totally underestimated, and of course we went through, they lost 20 million people. 20 million soldiers the North Vietnamese did. We lost 58,000, so big difference in doing it. So not all the missions were that risky. Some of them were. Some of them were worse. If you want to come back next year, I'll go into the worst one I ever flew over there, which was 10 times more intense than this was. It's hopefully going to be made into a movie here pretty soon. The guy that was in charge of it is up for the Medal of Honor right now. So that's a pretty interesting story in itself. Some of the really nice missions I had, which were fun to do, and I really enjoyed the flying and got to participate in them. We got a call one day that a submarine was off the coast, had a sick call guy, need to go out and pick him up. A submarine? We want to land on a submarine. No, I don't think so. But I put the front wheels down on the ground, and he came out and crawled up into the hole and took him back. Sick call. One of my favorite things to do, the USS New Jersey, which was a battleship, World War II battleship. You can see the guns on the thing here. 16-inch, right, Jack? 16-inch guns. Those things are 16-inch in diameter. So the round is, about that big, comes out of that thing. It's 3,000 pounds a round that thing weighed. And, of course, they could fire 9,000 pounds of ammunition downrange, 22 miles inland. Put it on a dime if you had a good guy that had been practicing. But those rounds had to be flown out to the aircraft or to the ship, and we got the rounds to do that. So we'd fly them out 3 rounds at a time, back and forth, back and forth. You fly 20, 30 sorties, getting them out there and resupplying them. But the nice thing is they would hand the Navy, of course. They'd hand real ice cream up through the hole to us. Powdered ice cream is the only thing we ever got, and that was hardly ever. Powdered ice cream does not compare to the Navy's real ice cream. One time I had to fly out off a coast about 60 miles and pick up somebody again that was sick and bring him back for surgery on the coast. They weren't able to hand it on the carrier, so you get to wear a little sticker up here on your uniform if you've done an aircraft carrier. Where did I do with it? Here we go. And some of the other missions, Christmas, New Year's, other times throughout the year, because of the type of aircraft we were, these USO shows would have bands, equipment, microphones, all this stuff to fly around with them. Chinook was the ideal aircraft, and so we got the mission to support these guys whenever they landed in country. So I've seen Bob Hope a couple times when I was there. Raquel Welch came over. Joey Heatherton I got to see. Chris Noel, I don't know who she was, but she was a movie star of some sort. big crowds show up for these USO shows. You can't believe what the morale is when one of these people show up and come over. Yeah, I could tell you, it's getting kind of late here, but I got a real fun John Wayne story. I got to meet him. Thing was different about John Wayne. All the rest of these guys, especially Bob Hope, and the morale was great, and everybody loved to see him, but he was there for his own glory, in my mind. He had the cameras in front of him all the time. He catered to the cameras, not so much to the troops behind it. I don't know if anybody's ever experienced that, but it was all about Bob Hope and the show he was going to do back home. And yeah, the guys loved him, and he came there with all the girls in the short skirts, and oh, that was wonderful, and all that was really great for all the GIs in the background. But we'd pack him up and we'd leave right after the show was over. John Wayne came over there, and we picked him up one morning in the dark, and taxied in. I got this mission to go pick up a bunch of VIPs. We didn't know how many or where they were going to go. We were told we would do that. We taxied into Nha Trang, turned the spotlight on. It's dark in the morning, about 4:30, 5 o'clock, and you see the shadows. Here they come. Oh, about 15 guys. And the guy in the front, if you ever know John Wayne, he had that certain walk, and that was him. I mean, we're like, no, it can't be him, you know. So he comes around back of the airplane, and the other people on along with him were the Detroit Tiger baseball team. They had won the World Series that year, so a bunch of those guys had volunteered to come over, and he came over with them. Anyway, we took him out, and he went right up. I mean, he didn't care. He wanted to go right where the troops were on the front line. And so we'd take him right out to the fire bases, right on the Cambodian border. We'd drop him, and we'd go up, orbit around, because you didn't want to land there because you start getting mortared in that. But he would get out, walk up. I mean, imagine you're out there, Cambodia, you're a long ways from nowhere. You don't know what's coming. Some guy gets off the aircraft and walks up and says, "Hi, I'm John Wayne." You know, it's like, yeah, right. You know. So, and he'd spend 45 minutes to an hour, and then we'd go down and pick him up and take him over to the next location, and he'd go off and do our thing, and he'd come back and pick him up and take him off to another one. He was as genuine and as real. He had no cameras with him. He was there for the troops. Got my respect. All right, we need to wrap this up. You're probably getting hungry like me. At the end of the tour, I'd been there 3 times. I mean, I extended and didn't come home for 3 years. Or 34 months I was over there. Went on several R&Rs. So I was in country flying actually about 1,100 days. Flew 900 days I was flying into the combat zone. So we're exposure to it. The helicopter pilots saw more action than any World War II pilot or ground pound did. The average infantryman in World War II only saw 62 days of combat in the years that they were over there, 3 years. So the type of war that we were at and the kind of mission that we had, the helicopter pilots in Vietnam saw more action than anybody else. And it's just a reason because of the type of terrain it was and what it was. So you get to that 3rd year, and I'm counting down the days. I got 4 days left, 3 days left, and I'm still flying right out on the front. So I'm thinking, man, I got to finish this. And it's like, please, Lord, just give me home. And the relief that you feel when you get on that airplane and fly out, when you're leaving all your buddies there. Like I said, it still makes me cry today because it was an amazing experience, and nothing's compared. Not a day goes by that I don't think of something that happened in Vietnam, and just grateful to the Lord that He's brought me home. So that's the end of my story. I'm not quite there, but when we did come home, most of the Vietnam veterans did not have a welcome home parade or a party or anything else. We came in, got off the airplane. They'd give you a ride to the airport. They'd hand you a ticket, and a lot of guys got out. So they just went back to their hometowns and resumed life. The ones that were going to do further duty would go home for 30 days leave and then report to the next duty station. You know, nothing, no big deal, no welcome home, no, yeah, good job or any of that kind of. It just didn't happen. So when the Freedom Bird came and got you, you said goodbye to all your buddies. You got on this aircraft and you flew home. The second you got in the air, the elation that the people, I mean, it was just a magical moment. It's just, wow, this is over. And I'm done and I'm going home. And I don't have any holes in me. So it's a pretty exciting moment. You know, you dream of that landing and your family coming out, or your wife or your kids. I wasn't married at the time. So that's the moment you're thinking of, and everybody's on the family. And so when it finally happens, I don't know if you've ever been there, but that is one emotional, exciting moment when you've survived what I survived and came back without a piece missing. Had wounded 3 times. There was just minor shrapnel wounds. Not like John Kerry. You got 3 Band-Aids put on. He took Purple Hearts. I turned down Purple Hearts because I didn't think I'd earned them. The kind of wounds I had were very minor in experience. 58,700, and they still haven't found them all. We still got 200 some over there that are still missing in that. After 14 years, 2.5 million people had served in the Vietnam War. 50,000 of them came from other countries. 303,000 wounded, amputees. You see this soldier here is greeted, comes in, he meets his mother. He's got one leg, and there was over 5,000 of those. MIA, and there's still most of them been found, but prisoners of war were all released by the North Vietnamese. 114 of them actually died in captivity while they're in there. I landed in Seattle, I guess it was, and I flew down to my brother's in Los Angeles. And in those days, you came down the ramp, and you walked across the tarmac, and you go pick your bags up, and then go behind the fence and go home. And I was coming off the airplane, and I wanted to see my brother. It'd be the first time I'd seen anybody in my family in 3 years, so I was excited. I was home. This is in this elated state yet, and just kind of numb. And as I'm walking across the tarmac, I see this blonde. I still got an eye for girls, even though I've been gone for a while. This blonde was running out across the tarmac, and she's just going lickety-split. And I thought, wow, some lucky guy has got a nice greeting coming to him. And I look back this way, and I see, looking for my brother. Can't see him in the crowd. I'll get there. I look back, and here she is, right in front of me. Blonde hair. Snaps her arms around me, gives me one great big smooch right on the lips. Whoa. She's got the wrong guy, but I'm not going to stay. I didn't know her. I had never seen her before. She backs off, whispers in my ear, "Welcome home, GI." I said, "Yes, sir." I got to do what any other American boy would do coming back from combat zone. I grabbed her and returned the favor. So that was my welcome home from Vietnam. I love to tell that story because it was a happy ending for me, and it was the perfect ending to be back and safe and thankful to the Lord that I was here. So I'm going to quit there. It's 1 o'clock. Told you I'd keep you. I got 3 more hours here yet, so you want to take another break? No, I'm done. We're going to quit right there. And Scott, I'll turn it back to you and call this a day. Yep. Oh, question. Yeah.
We lost 58,000 some odd U.S. soldiers, but how many did Vietnam lose?
20 million.
20 million?
They lost. Ho Chi Minh came south, first attack. killing civilians and military. Over a 3-month period, he killed, was it 20 million North Vietnamese or South Vietnamese? He just wiped them out. If you didn't want to go, he just killed you. So history books, or no, not 20 million. Excuse me, South Vietnamese. Yeah, not 20 million, 6 million. In the first, before we even went to war, they'd killed over 6 million. Pol Pot did the same thing. You heard the war, the killing fields of Pol Pot. Cambodia killed right at 20 million before that was over. The North Vietnamese actually stopped the Cambodians from killing, what's his name, Pol Pot, from executing all those people. That would have been a lot worse. And of course the Chinese, they killed mega millions during World War II, and that, yeah, we're very fortunate in this country to have the kind of country that we do. So, all right. Any other questions? Yeah. Yes, sir. You too. You're going to spring a leak like I do. Huh?
I know you got a great welcome home then, and I've heard. Good job.
Good job.
We're proud of you. I'm sure you heard it many times, but we want to say it again here. Thanks for sharing with us today and all that you've been through. And yeah, praise the Lord. But thank you so much, John Beckenhauer. Thank you for your service. Thank you all for being here today. You are dismissed.